the sleeping land before the legend. Take a slow breath, settle comfortably into your chair or beneath your blankets, and allow your mind to wander nearly 1,000 years into the past. Imagine a land where dawn arrives not with silence, but with the distant ringing of church bells, the haunting call of the muezzin echoing from elegant minarets, and the restless stamping of horses waiting impatiently behind wooden gates. The air carries the scent of olive trees, damp earth, smoke from cooking fires, and the salt breeze drifting inland from the Mediterranean. Somewhere beyond the hills, steel is already being sharpened, because in 11th century Spain, peace was never something anyone expected to last very long. Tonight, we are following the life of a man who would become one of Europe's greatest medieval legends. His name was Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, though history remembers him by another name entirely, El Cid Campeador. Warrior, commander, mercenary, nobleman, exile, hero, villain. Depending on who happened to be writing the story, he could be all of those things before breakfast. Like many famous figures, the real man gradually disappeared beneath layers of songs, poems, patriotic pride, and centuries of storytelling. Later generations imagined him as the perfect Christian knight, fearless against impossible odds, shining with divine purpose. Reality, as it usually does, proved considerably more complicated, because medieval Spain was never as simple as Christians fighting Muslims. That would make the story much easier. History rarely enjoys making things easy. Instead, imagine a giant patchwork quilt stitched together by kings who distrusted one another, princes plotting against their brothers, ambitious bishops calculating political alliances, Muslim rulers hiring Christian knights, Christian kings hiring Muslim archers, mercenaries changing employers with surprising regularity, and everyone insisting that God completely approved of whatever decision they had reached that particular week. It was, to put it gently, complicated. The Iberian Peninsula stretched beneath brilliant southern sunlight like a crossroads between worlds. Europe ended here, or perhaps it began here, depending on one's point of view. To the south lay North Africa across the narrow Strait of Gibraltar, scarcely 14 kilometers at its narrowest point. Across that strip of water came merchants carrying spices and silk, scholars discussing mathematics and astronomy, pilgrims, adventurers, refugees, and, every so often, armies. Long before Rodrigo Díaz drew his first breath, Muslim forces had crossed those waters. In the year 711, a Berber commander named Tariq ibn Ziyad landed upon the rocky cliff that would later bear his name. Jabal Tariq, the mountain of Tariq, slowly became Gibraltar. Legend claims Tariq burned his ships after landing, leaving his soldiers with only two choices, victory or death. Whether he truly did so remains uncertain. Historians tend to view dramatic stories with a healthy amount of suspicion. People in the Middle Ages, however, absolutely loved them. Within only a few years, the Visigothic kingdom that had ruled most of Spain collapsed with astonishing speed. Muslim armies swept across cities, valleys, and fertile plains. Córdoba, Toledo, Seville, Zaragoza, all became part of Al-Andalus, one of the most prosperous and sophisticated societies in medieval Europe. And prosperous it truly was. While much of northern Europe struggled through centuries often romanticized as castles and knights, but more accurately filled with muddy roads, poor harvests, and rather unpleasant sanitation, cities in Al-Andalus dazzled visitors. Córdoba became one of the largest cities on earth. Imagine streets illuminated by oil lamps long after sunset. Imagine libraries containing hundreds of thousands of books. Imagine physicians studying anatomy, philosophers debating Aristotle, engineers designing intricate irrigation systems, and artisans crafting delicate works of ivory and silver. Water flowed through gardens filled with orange blossoms. Fountains cooled marble courtyards. Poets wrote beneath shaded arches while scholars copied ancient Greek texts that much of Europe had forgotten. The city sparkled. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Europe, somebody was proudly inventing a slightly better pig enclosure. Civilizations rarely advance at exactly the same pace. Yet Al-Andalus was never entirely secure. Far to the north, hidden among the rugged mountains of Asturias, Christian kingdoms survived the initial conquest. They were small, isolated, and often desperately poor compared with the magnificent southern cities. But mountains possess remarkable defensive qualities. They are difficult to conquer, even more difficult to govern. Generation after generation, these northern kingdoms slowly expanded, not through one grand crusade, not through one glorious campaign, but through centuries of raids, treaties, marriages, betrayals, and endless negotiations. Later historians would call this long process the Reconquista. The word sounds tidy. Reality wasn't. Sometimes Christian kingdoms fought one another more fiercely than they fought Muslim rulers. Sometimes Muslim kingdoms allied themselves with Christian princes against rival Muslim states. Sometimes everyone changed sides before winter. One almost needed a map that updated every Tuesday. By the beginning of the 11th century, something unexpected transformed the political landscape. The once powerful caliphate of Córdoba fractured. Internal rivalries, succession disputes, ambitious governors, and political instability slowly shattered centralized authority. Instead of one great Muslim state, dozens of smaller kingdoms emerged. These became known as the Taifa kingdoms. Each Taifa possessed its own ruler, its own ambitions, its own fears, its own treasury, its own army, and perhaps most importantly, its own rivals. Some Taifa rulers were brilliant patrons of art and science. Others excelled primarily at alarming their neighbors. Competition became fierce. Palaces grew increasingly magnificent. Poets found generous patrons. Musicians flourished. But militarily, division carried obvious risks. The Christian kingdoms noticed. How could they not? North of the Duero River, kingdoms like Leon, Castile, Navarre, Aragon, and Catalonia watched carefully. Each ruler dreamed of expansion. Each dreamed of becoming stronger than his rivals. Each dreamed of wealth. Because war, contrary to heroic paintings, cost astonishing amounts of money. Armies required horses. Horses required food. Soldiers required wages. Castles required repairs. Blacksmiths required iron. Nothing came cheaply. Fortunately for ambitious kings, frightened Taifa rulers often agreed to pay tribute. These payments, called parias, became enormously important. Gold from southern cities flowed northward into Christian treasuries. That gold financed stronger armies. Those stronger armies demanded even larger tribute. It became a cycle feeding itself year after year. And into this world, one king would rise above many others. Fernando I, known today as Ferdinand the Great. Originally Count of Castile before becoming King of Leon and Castile, Ferdinand expanded his influence through warfare, diplomacy, and calculated marriages. He strengthened his realm steadily, never forgetting that crowns rested upon fragile foundations. His children would inherit not merely territory, but fierce rivalries. Among them were Sancho, Alfonso, Garcia, and two daughters. When Ferdinand died in 1065, instead of leaving everything to one heir, he divided his kingdom among his children. It seemed fair. Parents throughout history have often believed equal division prevents conflict. History, unfortunately, contains overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Within months, brothers who had grown together prepared for war against one another. Castile belonged to Sancho, Leon to Alfonso, Galicia to Garcia. The sisters received important cities. Nobody appeared particularly satisfied. It would not remain peaceful for long, because crowns have an unfortunate habit of encouraging sibling rivalry. Meanwhile, in a small village northeast of Burgos, another child had already begun growing into adulthood. The village was called Vivar. Not large. Not wealthy. Not especially remarkable. Stone houses clustered around cultivated fields. Peasants worked from sunrise until dusk. Shepherds guided flocks across dry hillsides. Blacksmiths hammered iron beneath clouds of sparks. Children chased one another through dusty lanes. The seasons dictated life with absolute authority. Spring planting. Summer heat. Autumn harvest. Winter endurance. Here, sometime around the year 1043, perhaps 1045, the exact date remains uncertain, a boy named Rodrigo Diaz entered the world. His father, Diego Lines, belonged to the lesser nobility. Not enormously powerful. Not insignificant either. A respectable knight. a man with land, obligations, and military responsibilities. Rodrigo inherited neither a kingdom nor fabulous riches. He inherited opportunity. In medieval society, that could prove equally valuable, especially for someone possessing courage, intelligence, and extraordinary skill with weapons. As a child, Rodrigo almost certainly experienced a life balancing privilege with discipline. Unlike peasant children, he would receive education, not extensive by modern standards, but enough. He likely learned reading to some degree, religious instruction, law, courtly behavior. Most importantly, warfare. Swordsmanship began young, horsemanship even younger. Boys destined for knighthood practically learned to ride before they learned proper table manners. Though admittedly, medieval table manners differed considerably from ours. If everyone avoided throwing bones directly at distinguished guests, the evening generally counted as successful. Rodrigo would spend countless hours practicing, holding heavy wooden training swords until his arms trembled, learning balance, footwork, timing, discipline, patience. Strength alone accomplished surprisingly little. Technique determined survival. A skilled knight became almost one with his horse. Movement flowed naturally. Reins responded almost invisibly. Lance lowered. Shield raised. The entire combination of rider, armor, and horse became a terrifying weapon. Yet no amount of training guaranteed survival. Every tournament, every border raid, every battlefield, every duel, each offered countless opportunities to die unexpectedly. Medieval life possessed remarkable unpredictability. One day you attended court. The next you discovered your cousin had declared war over grazing rights. Again. Because apparently sheep justified almost anything. Rodrigo's generation matured within this atmosphere. Borders shifted. Alliances changed. Kings died. New rulers emerged. Castles rose across strategic hills. Messengers galloped endlessly between courts carrying sealed letters whose contents might preserve peace or destroy it entirely. Throughout Europe, feudal society organized relationships through oaths. Lords granted land. Vassals promised loyalty. In theory, everyone understood their obligations. In practice, human ambition repeatedly complicated the arrangement. An oath lasted exactly as long as powerful people found it convenient. Rodrigo would eventually become famous not because he always served one master faithfully, but because he survived serving many. That distinction mattered enormously. The legendary El Cid celebrated in later poetry appears unwaveringly loyal. The historical Rodrigo proved much more pragmatic. Pragmatism, after all, tends to keep one alive. As the young nobleman approached adulthood, King Sancho II of Castile sought capable warriors. Sancho intended nothing less than reclaiming every piece of his father's divided inheritance. His brothers stood directly in the way. Fortunately for Sancho, one promising young knight from Vivar possessed remarkable talent. Rodrigo Díaz was about to enter royal service. Neither king nor knight could possibly imagine that their names would echo together across nearly 1,000 years of history. One sought a united kingdom. The other sought honor, fortune, and perhaps something more difficult to define: immortality. Though immortality seldom announces itself politely, usually it arrives disguised as another ordinary morning. The sun rises. A horse is saddled. A sword is buckled into place. Someone rides toward destiny without realizing history has quietly begun paying attention. And somewhere beyond the rolling Castilian hills, kingdoms waited. Wars gathered like distant thunder. The greatest chapter of medieval Spain had not yet been written. Its future hero was still simply Rodrigo, a young knight riding toward a king, toward exile, toward glory, toward legend. And our journey has only just begun. The young knight of Castile. The first light of morning spread slowly across the high plains of Castile, painting the dry hills in pale shades of gold and amber. A cool wind drifted over fields where shepherds were already awake, gathering their flocks before the summer heat settled across the land. Ravens circled above ancient stone towers, and somewhere in the distance a monastery bell rang softly through the still air. It was a familiar sound. The bell marked the hours for monks, but for knights it often marked something else entirely. Time to ride. In medieval Castile, the rhythm of life belonged to horses almost as much as it belonged to people. Roads were little more than dusty tracks winding between villages. Merchants moved cautiously beneath armed escorts. Messengers rode day and night carrying sealed letters that could announce peace, marriage, taxation, or war. Usually war. The kingdom itself felt unfinished. Castile was not yet the mighty power it would later become. It was a frontier society, forever looking south toward lands richer than its own, and forever looking inward at quarrels among ambitious nobles. Stone fortresses crowned lonely hills. Small villages huddled behind wooden palisades. Every generation expected conflict almost as naturally as changing seasons. Into this world stepped the young Rodrigo Diaz. He was no longer simply the son of Diego Lainez. Now he served at the royal court. For any young nobleman, court life represented both opportunity and danger. Success depended on much more than bravery. One needed diplomacy, patience, good manners, and the rare ability to survive conversations with powerful people whose opinions changed as often as the weather. The court of King Sancho II was energetic, ambitious, and restless. Sancho possessed the confidence of a man who believed destiny owed him something. His father, Ferdinand the Great, had divided his kingdoms among his children before dying. Castile went to Sancho. Leon went to Alfonso. Galicia to Garcia. To Ferdinand, it may have seemed like a sensible solution. To Sancho, it looked like theft. He considered himself the rightful heir to everything. Naturally, his brothers disagreed. Family reunions must have been remarkably uncomfortable. Rodrigo entered this tense environment as a young knight, perhaps still in his early 20s, but already earning attention for remarkable military skill. Later legends would portray him as almost superhuman from the beginning, defeating countless enemies with effortless grace. Reality was rather less theatrical. Skill came through relentless practice. Every morning brought weapons training. Sword drills repeated until muscles burned. Lance practice from horseback. Archery, though less prestigious than swordsmanship, remained useful. Wrestling. Shield work. Formation tactics. The life of a knight demanded endurance more than glamour. Armor itself could weigh over 20 kilograms. Contrary to popular myths, medieval knights were not clumsy iron statues incapable of standing if they fell. They trained constantly to move efficiently inside heavy mail and protective equipment. Even so, fighting while carrying that much weight beneath the blazing Iberian sun was exhausting. Sweat-soaked clothing beneath layers of chainmail. Dust clung to every surface. Leather straps rubbed raw against skin. There were no comfortable campaigns, only necessary ones. Rodrigo quickly developed a reputation, not merely for courage. Courage was expected. Every knight claimed courage. Some demonstrated it. Others preferred discussing it over wine after someone else had done the fighting. Rodrigo distinguished himself through discipline. He remained calm under pressure. He read battlefields carefully. He understood timing. Perhaps most importantly, he knew when not to attack. That quality often separated experienced soldiers from heroic corpses. King Sancho noticed. Kings constantly searched for capable men, not simply noble men. Capable ones. Birth could open doors. Ability kept them open. Rodrigo gradually became one of Sancho's trusted military companions. Whether entirely accurate or not, it reflects the confidence Sancho placed in the young knight. The banner mattered enormously. It served as the army's heartbeat. Soldiers looked toward it amid smoke and confusion. As long as the banner stood, hope remained. Lose the banner, and panic spread quickly. To carry it required exceptional trust. While Rodrigo's reputation grew, the political situation deteriorated with remarkable efficiency. Sancho began moving against his brothers. The first target became Garcia, ruler of Galicia. Compared with Castile and Leon, Galicia occupied the rugged northwest, facing the Atlantic Ocean. Green hills replaced Castile's dry plains. Rain arrived frequently, nourishing forests unfamiliar to the central plateau. Yet geography offered little protection against determined ambition. Sancho defeated Garcia. The youngest brother lost his kingdom and eventually found himself imprisoned. One rival eliminated. Two remained. Alfonso now understood the danger. His older brother intended to reunite their father's inheritance by force. Negotiations seemed increasingly unlikely. War approached. The decisive confrontation arrived near the village of Galpedra during the cold days of January 1072. Winter battles carried their own misery. Frozen ground jarred horses' hooves. Cold winds penetrated every gap in clothing. Breath drifted white into the morning air. Men shivered while waiting for orders. Steel felt painfully cold against bare hands. Imagine standing in silence before sunrise. Thousands of men. Rows of banners fluttering. Horses stamping nervously. No music. Only the occasional clink of armor. The smell of damp earth. Wood smoke lingering from breakfast fires. Every soldier wondering whether sunset would ever arrive. Then horns sounded. The waiting ended. The Battle of Galpedra became a brutal contest between brothers. Sancho's Castilian forces clashed against Alfonso's Leonese army. Lines advanced. Shields collided. Lances shattered. War horses thundered across frozen fields. Individual acts of courage disappeared inside enormous clouds of dust and confusion. Later chronicles suggest Rodrigo played a significant role in Sancho's victory. Separating fact from patriotic embellishment remains difficult. Medieval writers adored heroic champions. Still, there seems little doubt Rodrigo fought with distinction. Sancho emerged victorious. Alfonso fled. Soon afterward, he sought refuge in the Muslim Taifa of Toledo. An interesting choice. The future king of Christian Leon found protection under a Muslim ruler, because medieval Spain stubbornly refused to behave according to simple modern expectations. Religion certainly mattered. Politics often mattered more. With Alfonso removed, Sancho achieved what he believed was justice. Castile, Leon, Galicia, united once again beneath one crown. At last, the inheritance of Ferdinand the Great appeared restored. The king must have felt triumphant. History, however, has a peculiar habit of punishing excessive confidence. Only a few months later, Sancho laid siege to the city of Zamora. The city belonged to his sister, Urraca. She refused to surrender. The walls held firm. Sieges rarely resembled dramatic scenes from films. Mostly they involved waiting, digging, building siege works, watching supplies diminish, listening to arguments among officers, eating mediocre food, and hoping disease reached the defenders before reaching your own camp. Occasionally someone attempted something spectacular. One such man was Belito Dolfos. Whether remembered as assassin, patriot, or traitor depended entirely upon which side happened to tell the story. According to tradition, Belito rode out from Zamora pretending to defect. King Sancho granted him audience. As the king listened, Belito suddenly thrust a spear into him before escaping back toward the city. The attack shocked everyone. The king who had nearly reunited his father's kingdom died not in glorious battle, but through sudden treachery. History can be deeply unfair. One moment a conqueror, the next, a corpse carried back to camp. Sancho left no children, no obvious successor. Only one brother remained, Alfonso. The same Alfonso who had recently fled into exile. Almost overnight, the political landscape transformed again. Alfonso returned. He claimed the United Kingdom. Many accepted him. Others hesitated. Among those closest to the late King Sancho, suspicion lingered. Had Alfonso somehow known? Had he encouraged conspiracy? Did Belito act alone? Or had powerful interests quietly removed Sancho? No one could prove anything. No one ever would. Rumors, however, possess remarkable longevity. One legend tells of Rodrigo Díaz confronting Alfonso at the Church of Santa Gadea in Burgos. There, according to later tradition, Rodrigo forced Alfonso to swear publicly that he had played no role in Sancho's murder. The scene appears irresistible. A fearless knight standing before a newly crowned king, demanding an oath, refusing submission until truth, or at least a declaration, emerged. It became one of Spain's most famous stories. Unfortunately for lovers of dramatic history, it almost certainly never happened. Contemporary sources remain silent. The tale appears only generations later. Like many legends surrounding El Cid, it reveals less about Rodrigo himself than about how later Spaniards wished to remember him. They wanted a hero who answered only to justice, a man brave enough to challenge kings. Reality offers something subtler. Rodrigo almost certainly accepted Alfonso's rule because he had little alternative. The kingdom required stability. Open rebellion would accomplish little besides civil war. Even the greatest warrior cannot fight an entire kingdom alone, at least not for very long. So Rodrigo entered the service of Alfonso VI. Notice the remarkable shift. Yesterday, he fought against this man. Today, he served him. Such changes were entirely normal. Personal loyalty mattered. Political survival mattered more. Alfonso, for his part, recognized Rodrigo's talents despite their previous loyalties. A wise ruler rarely discarded capable commanders simply because they had once served another king, especially when that other king happened to be his deceased brother. Rodrigo remained valuable. The frontier still demanded soldiers. The Taifa kingdoms still maneuvered for advantage. New campaigns awaited. Yet beneath the surface, trust remained fragile. Perhaps Alfonso never entirely forgot Rodrigo's close friendship with Sancho. Perhaps Rodrigo never entirely forgot serving another king. Respect existed. Complete confidence did not. The seeds of future conflict had already been planted. Neither man fully realized it yet. For the moment, Rodrigo's fortunes continued rising. He married Jimena Diaz, a noblewoman connected to the royal family. The marriage strengthened his position within Castilian society. Together, they would eventually have children and establish one of the most famous households in medieval Spain. From the outside, life appeared almost ideal. Prestige. Marriage. Royal service. Growing fame. Yet history often grants its greatest legends only brief moments of peace before testing them again. Beyond the southern horizon, Muslim Taifa rulers watched Alfonso's expanding kingdom with increasing concern. Tribute payments continued. Diplomatic tensions grew sharper. Raids became more frequent. The balance of power shifted year after year. Soon, Rodrigo Diaz would ride farther than ever before. He would face enemies unlike any he had known. He would make decisions that transformed him from respected knight into controversial exile. Ironically, it was not defeat that changed his destiny. It was success. And sometimes, success is the most dangerous thing that can happen to a rising star. The road ahead stretched beneath an endless Castilian sky. Dust swirled behind mounted riders. The banners of Leon and Castile fluttered in the wind. Far away, beyond rivers and mountains, another chapter waited. One that would force Rodrigo Diaz to choose between loyalty, honor, ambition, and survival. The legend of El Cid was only beginning to take shape. The king's champion. The summer sun rose slowly over the broad plains of Castile, washing the countryside in warm gold before the day's heat settled over the earth like a heavy blanket. Long shadows stretched from lonely watchtowers, vineyards shimmered beneath a light morning mist, and the distant silhouettes of castles stood motionless against an endless blue sky. For a few peaceful moments, the kingdom appeared calm. It was an illusion. Somewhere beyond those hills, riders were already carrying messages between courts. Tax collectors counted silver. Monks copied manuscripts in cool stone monasteries. Merchants packed wagons with wool, wine, leather, and iron. Blacksmiths hammered horseshoes, while stable boys brushed nervous war horses. And somewhere, inevitably, someone was preparing for war. Such was life in 11th century Iberia. War was not always a great campaign. More often, it arrived in smaller pieces. A disputed border. A stolen herd of cattle. An unpaid tribute. An insult delivered at court. A marriage alliance that pleased one noble family and enraged 3 others. Entire battles occasionally began because powerful men simply refused to admit they had been wrong. Human nature has always possessed remarkable consistency. For Rodrigo Diaz, now firmly established in the service of King Alfonso VI, these years became a period of remarkable growth. His reputation spread steadily through Castile, Leon, and beyond. Veterans respected him. Younger knights admired him. Nobles watched him with cautious curiosity. Success, however, could be dangerous. Kings appreciated talented servants. Other nobles often did not. Every promotion earned admiration from some people, envy from many more. Rodrigo's rise inevitably created rivals. The medieval court resembled a battlefield where swords were replaced by whispered conversations. A careless remark could destroy a reputation. A rumor repeated often enough became accepted truth. An ambitious courtier needed only patience. Eventually, everyone made mistakes. Rodrigo, despite later legends portraying him as nearly flawless, remained thoroughly human. He possessed confidence. Perhaps a little too much confidence. He valued honor deeply, sometimes more deeply than diplomacy. And while these qualities inspired soldiers, they occasionally irritated kings. Still, Alfonso recognized his usefulness. The frontier required capable commanders. The Taifa kingdoms of Muslim Spain continued paying tribute, those valuable parias that filled the royal treasury with gold from prosperous southern cities. The arrangement benefited everyone, at least on paper. The Taifa rulers bought peace. Alfonso gained wealth. The nobles received opportunities for military glory. Unfortunately, peace purchased with money has an unfortunate habit of becoming more expensive every year. Eventually, someone begins asking whether the payments should continue at all. The Taifa kingdoms themselves faced growing instability. The once mighty Caliphate of Córdoba had fragmented into dozens of competing states, each ruled by its own emir. Seville, Granada, Toledo, Zaragoza, Badajoz, Valencia. Each possessed impressive cities, flourishing markets, beautiful palaces, and sophisticated scholars. Each also possessed nervous rulers who spent considerable energy worrying about neighboring kingdoms. Sometimes they feared Christian kings. Sometimes they feared fellow Muslims. Often they feared both simultaneously. Maintaining power required delicate diplomacy. One Taifa might hire Christian mercenaries against another Muslim rival. A Christian king might ally himself with one Muslim ruler while attacking another. Modern readers sometimes expect clear religious divisions. Reality stubbornly refuses such simplicity. Gold crossed religious boundaries far more easily than armies sometimes did. Rodrigo soon experienced this political complexity firsthand. One of Alfonso's important allies was the Muslim ruler of Seville. Another Taifa, Granada, enjoyed different alliances. Border disputes between these neighboring kingdoms occasionally erupted into violence. When that happened, Christian knights serving Christian kings often found themselves fighting on behalf of Muslim allies. History delights in surprising expectations. Around 1079, Alfonso entrusted Rodrigo with an important diplomatic mission. He traveled south to Seville, collecting tribute owed to Castile. This task demanded more than military strength. It required tact, negotiation, authority, the ability to represent the king without provoking unnecessary conflict. Rodrigo performed the mission successfully, but events soon became complicated, because they always did. While Rodrigo remained in Seville, another Castilian noble, Count Garcia Ordóñez, entered neighboring Granada on behalf of its ruler. The political tensions between Seville and Granada exploded into open conflict. The armies marched. Rodrigo suddenly found himself leading forces supporting Seville, facing fellow Christians. Again, the resulting engagement became known as the Battle of Cabra. It was not among the largest battles of the century, yet for Rodrigo's career, it proved immensely significant. His leadership demonstrated remarkable tactical skill. His forces defeated those aligned with Granada. Even more importantly, or perhaps more awkwardly, Rodrigo captured Count Garcia Ordóñez himself. Capturing an enemy noble represented a tremendous achievement. Capturing one of your fellow countrymen while both technically served the same king. Well, that created interesting conversations afterward. Rodrigo treated the Count honorably, eventually releasing him after the customary ransom arrangements. By the standards of medieval warfare, this reflected proper knightly conduct. Unfortunately, Garcia Ordóñez never forgot the humiliation. Few proud nobles would. Defeat wounded more than the body. It bruised pride. Pride often proved slower to heal. Over the coming years, Garcia would become one of Rodrigo's most determined political enemies. Sometimes the most dangerous wounds are invisible. Back at Alfonso's court, Rodrigo's influence continued growing. He enjoyed royal favor. His victories enhanced the kingdom's prestige. Yet whispers spread quietly through palace corridors. Some nobles suggested Rodrigo had become too independent, too proud, too confident, too willing to act according to his own judgment. Whether these accusations were fair hardly mattered. Perception frequently outweighs reality. Imagine the royal palace at Leon during one autumn evening. Torches flicker along stone walls. Servants carry roasted lamb, fresh bread, olives, and dark red wine into the great hall. Musicians play softly while nobles discuss politics between courses. Laughter echoes beneath heavy wooden beams. But beneath the pleasant atmosphere lies constant calculation. Who sits nearest the king? Who receives the warmest greeting? Whose advice is requested? Whose opinions are ignored? Every glance carries meaning. Every conversation may hide another purpose. Rodrigo undoubtedly understood this world. Whether he enjoyed it remains another question. Men who excel on battlefields often grow impatient inside courtrooms. Steel offers clarity. Politics rarely does. Meanwhile, Alfonso pursued increasingly ambitious goals. One city above all captured his imagination: Toledo. Ancient capital of the Visigoths. Magnificent center of learning. Strategically positioned along the Tagus River. Capturing Toledo would transform the balance of power across Iberia. For centuries, it had stood among the jewels of Al-Andalus. Its libraries contained priceless manuscripts. Its artisans produced magnificent metalwork. Its walls guarded enormous wealth. Alfonso understood its symbolic importance as well as its military value. Recovering it would suggest he inherited the legacy of ancient Spain itself. The opportunity finally arrived in 1085. After years of political maneuvering and pressure, Toledo surrendered peacefully to Alfonso VI. No catastrophic sack. No weeks of bloody street fighting. Instead, negotiation prevailed. The city's Muslim population received guarantees. Religious communities retained considerable rights. Church bells once again rang openly across Toledo, joining, not immediately replacing, the city's rich cultural traditions. The capture stunned Europe. A major Christian victory. A city long associated with Islamic civilization had changed hands. Celebrations erupted across Christendom. Yet success carried unforeseen consequences. The Muslim rulers of southern Spain suddenly faced a frightening reality. If Toledo could fall, what city might come next? Fear spread rapidly. The Taifar rulers realized they could no longer resist Alfonso individually. Something drastic had to happen. Across the Strait of Gibraltar, another power had been rising quietly. Far beyond the cities of Iberia, deep within North Africa, a movement of fierce religious reformers had forged a disciplined military state. They called themselves the Almoravids. Unlike the divided Taifar rulers, the Almoravids possessed unity. Unlike many Iberian armies, they had campaigned relentlessly across deserts and mountains. Their soldiers were hardened by difficult conditions. Their leaders believed themselves defenders of true faith. Their ruler, Yusuf ibn Tashfin, watched developments in Spain with growing interest. Soon, desperate Taifa emirs sent urgent messages southward. Help us. Cross the sea. Save Al-Andalus. It was a request that would change Spanish history forever. One ruler reportedly hesitated. Inviting foreign armies into one's country has always involved certain risks. Another supposedly replied with memorable honesty. I would rather herd camels for Yusuf than herd pigs for Alfonso. A colorful way of expressing priorities. Whether those exact words were spoken remains uncertain. The sentiment, however, captures the desperation perfectly. While these enormous events unfolded, Rodrigo continued serving Alfonso. Yet tensions between king and champion quietly accumulated. No dramatic argument. No shouted confrontation. Simply a growing distance. The king increasingly listened to other advisors. Some courtiers questioned Rodrigo's judgment. Others envied his prestige. Court politics resemble slow-moving storms. Clouds gather long before thunder arrives. The incident that finally broke their relationship began with a border raid. Rodrigo launched an unauthorized campaign into territory connected with the Taifa of Toledo, now under Alfonso's control and influence. Perhaps he intended retaliation. Perhaps he believed swift action necessary. Perhaps communication simply failed. Historians continue debating the details. What mattered was Alfonso's reaction. The king saw insubordination. Rodrigo believed he had acted in royal interests. Each man viewed the situation differently. Neither proved willing to yield. Years of trust dissolved surprisingly quickly. In 1081, Alfonso made his decision. Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar was banished. Exiled from the kingdom, he had served faithfully for years. His lands confiscated. His household disrupted. His future uncertain. Imagine the moment. Not a dramatic public trial. Not a spectacular confrontation. Simply royal orders. Pack your belongings. Leave. Do not return without permission. The same roads Rodrigo had ridden as the king's champion now carried him away from Castile. The villages looked unchanged. The castles still crowned the hills. Church bells still echoed across the valleys. Only his place within that landscape had altered. Behind him lay his homeland. Ahead, nobody knew. An exile possesses a peculiar kind of freedom. He owns little. He owes much. He carries his reputation like luggage. For Rodrigo, reputation would become his greatest possession, because wherever he rode, men already knew his name. Some feared it. Some respected it. Some wished to hire it. The king had cast him out. The world beyond Castile was preparing to welcome him. And in one of history's greatest ironies, the Christian knight destined to become Spain's greatest hero would soon enter the service of a Muslim ruler. The legend of El Cid was about to become far more extraordinary than anyone could have imagined. Exile and the road to Zaragoza. There is a peculiar kind of silence that follows the loss of everything familiar. Not the silence of an empty room. Not even the silence of midnight after rain. It is the silence that settles over a traveler who has crossed an invisible line and suddenly realizes there is no home waiting behind him. Imagine Rodrigo Díaz riding eastward across Castile. The roads were the same roads he had traveled dozens of times before. The villages still smelled of wood smoke and fresh bread. Shepherds still guided their sheep across dusty hillsides. Children still chased one another through narrow streets beneath curious eyes. The world had not changed, only his place within it. A few weeks earlier, people had greeted him as one of King Alfonso's greatest captains. Now they looked at him differently. Some bowed politely. Others quietly avoided conversation. No one wanted to appear too friendly toward a man who had fallen from royal favor. Kings possessed long memories, and even longer reach. Rodrigo traveled with his family, loyal household knights, servants, and retainers. Perhaps a few hundred people altogether. They formed a moving village, carrying wagons loaded with armor, clothing, weapons, household goods, food, tools, and precious documents proving ownership of lands that, at least for the moment, no longer truly belonged to them. Exile was not simply a punishment for one man. It became a burden shared by everyone who had chosen to follow him. Some undoubtedly wondered whether they had made the correct decision. Others never questioned it. Loyalty can be surprisingly practical. If Rodrigo regained the king's favor, those who remained faithful might be richly rewarded. If he did not, well, that was tomorrow's problem. For now, there were horses to feed, children to comfort, meals to prepare. The ordinary concerns of life never pause simply because history is unfolding around us. One of Rodrigo's first destinations was the monastery of San Pedro de Cardena near Burgos. The monastery had stood quietly among gentle hills for generations. Thick stone walls protected peaceful cloisters where Benedictine monks spent their days praying, farming, reading, and copying manuscripts by candlelight. Compared with royal courts, monasteries moved at an entirely different pace. The loudest sound might be the turning of parchment pages, or perhaps someone accidentally dropping a bucket. History tends not to record such dramatic moments. Here, according to tradition, Rodrigo entrusted the care of his wife Jimena and their children to the monks before continuing his uncertain journey. Whether every detail survives accurately through the centuries is impossible to know, but the emotional truth feels entirely believable. Imagine saying farewell without knowing when, or if, you would return. Jimena standing beside the monastery gate. Children too young to understand why their father could not simply stay. Rodrigo trying to appear calm, trying to reassure them, trying not to reveal the uncertainty inside his own heart. Behind them, monastery bells echoed gently through the afternoon air. Ahead lay an unknown future. There are moments in history when legends stop being legends, when they become simply husbands, or wives, or frightened parents doing their best. This was one of those moments. Rodrigo rode away. The road stretched endlessly before him. His destination remained unclear. His options were limited. In medieval Europe, a nobleman without a lord occupied an uncomfortable position. He possessed military skill but no legal authority, honor but no secure income, followers who required payment, horses that required expensive care, armor that needed repairs. An army, even a small one, was astonishingly expensive. Glory did not feed people. Silver did. Rodrigo first attempted reconciliation. He sought employment elsewhere within Christian Spain. He approached Count Berenguer Ramon II of Barcelona. It seemed sensible. Barcelona was prosperous, powerful, strategically important. Its count might appreciate hiring one of Iberia's finest military commanders. Instead, Rodrigo received rejection. Perhaps political pressure influenced the decision. Perhaps Alfonso's displeasure made Rodrigo seem too risky. Perhaps the count simply disliked him. History does not always explain itself. Whatever the reason, Barcelona's gates remained effectively closed. Rodrigo continued riding. His choices narrowed. Eventually, he turned toward one of the richest cities in northeastern Iberia, Zaragoza. To modern visitors, Zaragoza sits comfortably beside the Ebro River, its skyline dominated by magnificent churches and broad avenues. In the 11th century, however, it belonged to the Muslim Taifa of Zaragoza. Its ruler, Al-Mu'tamin, governed a wealthy kingdom renowned for scholarship, architecture, agriculture, and trade. The city's markets overflowed with textiles from distant lands, silks from the east, fine leather, glassware, ivory carvings, books copied by skilled scribes. The scent of cinnamon, saffron, roasted lamb, and fresh bread drifted through bustling streets where Arabic, Romance dialects, Hebrew, and Latin mixed together in lively conversation. Merchants argued cheerfully over prices. Children laughed beside elaborate fountains. Scholars debated mathematics beneath shaded courtyards. Musicians performed in palace gardens. Compared with many northern towns, Zaragoza felt almost astonishingly cosmopolitan. Rodrigo entered this city not as a conqueror, not as a crusader, not as a spy, but as a man looking for work. It remains one of history's delightful ironies. The knight later celebrated as the greatest Christian hero of medieval Spain found employment serving a Muslim ruler. Modern expectations often struggle with this reality. The Middle Ages themselves had far less difficulty. Al-Mu'tamin welcomed him. The Taifa ruler understood exactly what Rodrigo represented: experience, leadership, prestige, military genius. Every ambitious ruler desired capable commanders. Religion mattered. Winning battles mattered too. Rodrigo accepted the offer. Some later generations found this deeply uncomfortable. They preferred heroes who remained perfectly loyal to simple causes. Reality, once again, proved richer. Rodrigo was not betraying Christianity, nor was he abandoning his homeland. He was surviving. A banished nobleman needed income. His men required wages. His horses required oats. Life possessed practical requirements that legends often overlook. Soon Rodrigo became one of Zaragoza's principal military commanders. His employer changed. His professionalism did not. He reorganized forces, strengthened frontier defenses, improved discipline, planned campaigns. The Taifa kingdom faced constant threats from neighboring Christian rulers eager to expand their territories. Ironically, many of those rulers had once been Rodrigo's allies. Now circumstances placed them on opposite sides of battlefields. Among them stood the Count of Barcelona, the same nobleman who had refused to employ him. History enjoys symmetry. Before long, conflict erupted. The Taifa of Zaragoza found itself threatened by a coalition including the Count of Barcelona and the King of Aragon. Rodrigo prepared the defense. Imagine him standing atop Zaragoza's walls as dawn broke across the Ebro Valley. The city slowly awakened behind him. Smoke rose from countless chimneys. Market stalls prepared to open. Donkeys carried water through narrow streets. Beyond the walls stretched open countryside where enemy banners appeared on distant ridges. The citizens looked toward Rodrigo. Some probably wondered whether this Christian knight truly intended to defend them. He did, because that was now his duty. And Rodrigo Diaz took duty seriously. Campaigns followed one another across Aragon and Catalonia. Rodrigo demonstrated extraordinary mobility. Rather than relying solely upon large armies, he emphasized speed, careful reconnaissance, knowledge of terrain, rapid cavalry strikes, flexible tactics. He understood that victory often belonged not to the strongest force, but to the commander who best understood timing. His enemies discovered this repeatedly. Perhaps the greatest demonstration came in 1082 near Almanar. The coalition forces advanced confidently. Rodrigo responded with calculated precision. His troops maneuvered effectively across difficult ground. The enemy formation faltered. Confusion spread. Then came the decisive cavalry assault. Dust exploded beneath hundreds of charging horses. Lances leveled. War cries echoed across the plain. The coalition collapsed. Among those captured was none other than Count Berenguer Ramon II of Barcelona. Yes, the very man who had refused Rodrigo employment. History occasionally displays an unexpectedly sharp sense of humor. Imagine the conversation. Months earlier. "I'm afraid we have no place for you. Now, I'm afraid you have become my prisoner." One suspects Rodrigo appreciated the irony. To his credit, he treated the Count with courtesy. Prisoners of noble birth represented valuable assets. Ransom, not revenge, remained the usual objective. Rodrigo released him after appropriate negotiations. Professionalism mattered. Cruelty rarely paid. Victory at Almanar transformed Rodrigo's reputation. He was no longer merely an exiled Castilian knight. He had become one of the most respected military commanders in all Iberia. Friends admired him. Enemies respected him. Even Alfonso VI could hardly ignore the growing fame of the man he had banished. Meanwhile, life in Zaragoza flourished despite constant political tension. Rodrigo experienced something unusual, a multicultural court unlike anything he had known in Castile. He encountered Muslim scholars discussing astronomy, Jewish physicians practicing advanced medicine, Arabic poets composing elegant verses, engineers designing irrigation systems that transformed dry fields into fertile gardens. The Taifa kingdoms preserved and expanded knowledge inherited from Greece, Rome, Persia, and beyond. Rodrigo almost certainly absorbed more than military experience during these years. One need not become a scholar to appreciate learning. Exposure changes people. The world grows larger. Enemies become human beings. Simple assumptions begin to fade. This did not erase religious differences, nor political rivalry, but it complicated them. And complicated truths often survive longer than simple myths. As years passed, Rodrigo accumulated wealth. His household expanded. His followers increased. Veterans from many backgrounds entered his service. Christian knights fought beside Muslim cavalry. Local militias supported seasoned mercenaries. Shared danger often creates stronger bonds than shared ancestry. Around evening campfires, soldiers exchanged stories. Some spoke Arabic, others Castilian. Some prayed facing Mecca. Others crossed themselves before sleeping, yet all worried about tomorrow's battle. Fear, after all, requires no translation. Far away, however, events larger than any individual continued unfolding. King Alfonso VI celebrated his capture of Toledo. The Taifa kingdoms grew increasingly desperate. Across North Africa, Yusuf ibn Tashfin prepared his armies. The Almoravids were coming. They would bring disciplined warriors hardened by years of campaigning across the deserts of Morocco. They would alter the balance of power forever, and they would eventually force Rodrigo Diaz and Alfonso VI back onto the same side. Not because they had forgiven one another, but because history had introduced an enemy neither could ignore. The road of exile had unexpectedly become the road to greatness. Yet Rodrigo still did not bear the full weight of his legendary title. That name was beginning to spread through Muslim Spain. A name spoken with admiration, sometimes with fear, sometimes with both. They called him Al-Sayyid, the Lord. In Castilian, that word would slowly transform into something history would never forget. El Cid. The legend had finally found its name, the return to a king. There are moments in history when old enemies become reluctant allies, not because they suddenly discover friendship, not because years of bitterness quietly disappear, but because a new danger arrives that is so vast, so relentless, that yesterday's quarrels begin to look strangely unimportant. The years Rodrigo Diaz spent in Zaragoza had transformed him. When he first rode into the city, he had been an exiled noble searching desperately for employment. Now he commanded respect across the Iberian Peninsula. His victories at Almenar and other campaigns had become the talk of courts from Barcelona to Seville. Christian kings knew his reputation. Muslim emirs valued his skill. Mercenaries hoped to serve beneath his banner. Even those who disliked him admitted one uncomfortable truth. Rodrigo Diaz had become exceptionally difficult to defeat. Yet beyond the walls of Zaragoza, events far greater than any single commander were unfolding. The Taifa kingdoms that had once flourished after the collapse of the Caliphate of Córdoba were growing increasingly anxious. Year after year they had paid tribute to Alfonso VI, hoping that gold might purchase peace. It had worked. Until it no longer did. The fall of Toledo in 1085 changed everything. For centuries, Toledo had stood as one of the greatest cities of Al-Andalus. It was more than a military prize. It represented learning, culture, commerce, and prestige. When Alfonso entered the city, Christian Europe celebrated. Across Muslim Spain, however, celebration was replaced by fear. If Toledo had fallen, who would be next? Seville? Granada? Badajoz? Valencia? The Taifa rulers looked at one another with growing uncertainty. Separately, none of them possessed enough strength to stop Alfonso. Together, perhaps. But unity had never been their greatest talent. They argued. They negotiated. They hesitated. Eventually, they accepted an uncomfortable truth. Help would have to come from somewhere else. Across the Strait of Gibraltar, the Almoravid Empire had grown into one of the most disciplined military powers of the Western Islamic world. Their ruler, Yusuf ibn Tashfin, governed from Marrakesh with remarkable authority. His armies had united vast regions of North Africa beneath a banner of religious reform and military discipline. Unlike the Taifa kingdoms, the Almoravids were not divided by endless rivalries. They marched as one. Their soldiers were hardened by long campaigns across deserts where survival itself demanded endurance. Many had grown up in landscapes where water determined life and death. Their cavalry moved with astonishing speed. Their commanders valued strict discipline above luxury. Compared with the elegant courts of Seville or Zaragoza, Almoravid camps appeared almost austere. Simple tents. Practical clothing. Few unnecessary comforts. It was an army built for conquest rather than display. The Taifa rulers swallowed their pride. Messengers crossed the Mediterranean. They requested Yusuf's assistance. The decision carried enormous risk. Inviting a foreign army into one's homeland rarely ends exactly as planned. History contains rather a lot of examples. Even then, some emirs hesitated. One reportedly warned that once the Almoravids arrived, they might never leave. He was absolutely correct. Unfortunately, he was also running out of alternatives. Yusuf accepted. In 1086, thousands of soldiers crossed the Strait of Gibraltar. Imagine the scene. Long lines of ships emerging from the morning mist. War horses stamping nervously aboard crowded vessels. The smell of salt water mixing with leather, sweat, and oiled weapons. Experienced veterans stood silently as Spain slowly appeared on the horizon. Many had never seen Iberia before. They had heard stories. Rich cities. Fertile valleys. Powerful Christian kingdoms. Now they had come to test those stories. News traveled north quickly. Alfonso VI immediately understood the seriousness of the situation. This was no ordinary border raid, no quarrel between neighboring rulers. A disciplined imperial army had entered the peninsula. Every experienced commander recognized the danger. Alfonso gathered his forces. Knights from Leon and Castile answered the royal summons. Nobles assembled their retainers. Bishops blessed banners. Armorers worked day and night repairing mail, sharpening swords, and fitting new horseshoes. The king intended to stop the invasion before it spread. Rodrigo, however, was not among them. He remained in Zaragoza, still officially in exile, still serving another ruler. The irony was difficult to ignore. One of Castile's finest generals watched from afar while his homeland prepared for one of its greatest tests. Whether Alfonso regretted banishing Rodrigo at that moment remains unknown. Perhaps he did. Kings rarely admit mistakes, even to themselves. The armies met near Sagrajas, not far from Badajoz, on October 23, 1086. Morning arrived beneath a clear autumn sky. Thousands of men stood waiting across open fields. Christian banners fluttered in the breeze. Opposite them stretched the disciplined lines of Yusuf's Almoravid army. At first glance, Alfonso may have believed victory possible. His knights had defeated Muslim armies before, many times. This battle would prove different. The Almoravids possessed extraordinary discipline. Yusuf arranged his forces carefully, keeping experienced reserves hidden behind the front lines. The Christian cavalry launched powerful attacks. Steel crashed against steel. Lances shattered. Horses screamed. Dust rose so thickly that many soldiers could scarcely see beyond a few yards. For hours the struggle remained uncertain. Then Yusuf committed his reserves. Fresh troops surged forward against exhausted Christian knights. The balance shifted. Alfonso's army began to collapse. The retreat became increasingly desperate. Many nobles fell. Thousands died. The king himself barely escaped with his life, wounded in one leg. It was one of the greatest defeats suffered by Christian Spain during the century. Europe listened in stunned silence. The triumph at Toledo suddenly appeared far less secure. The Almoravids had announced their arrival with devastating force. Oddly enough, Yusuf did not immediately continue his conquest. News arrived from North Africa demanding his attention. Political matters required his return across the sea. He departed, leaving the Taifa rulers temporarily independent. For Alfonso, this unexpected pause became invaluable. He needed time. Time to rebuild. Time to strengthen defenses. Time to reconsider old decisions. One name inevitably returned to his thoughts: Rodrigo Díaz. The exile. The commander who had spent years proving his brilliance. The man who now possessed exactly the experience the kingdom required. Messages began traveling between Alfonso and Rodrigo. Carefully written. Politely worded. Neither side wished to appear desperate. Yet both understood circumstances had changed. Rodrigo no longer needed the king quite as much as before. He had wealth. Influence. An experienced private army. Alfonso no longer held every advantage. Negotiations required mutual respect. Eventually reconciliation emerged. Not perfect trust. Not complete forgiveness. Something more practical. Rodrigo returned to royal service. Imagine his journey back across Castile. The same roads that had witnessed his exile now welcomed his return. Villagers remembered him. Some older. Some poorer. Some no doubt surprised to see him once again riding beneath royal authority. The landscape itself remained unchanged. Golden wheat fields rippled beneath the wind. Stone castles watched silently from rocky hills. Church bells echoed across distant valleys. Only the politics had shifted. As usual, Alfonso greeted Rodrigo with honors appropriate to a valued commander. The king needed experienced leadership more than wounded pride. Rodrigo accepted. He, too, understood the larger picture. The Almoravids represented a threat unlike any Spain had faced in generations. Personal grievances could wait. The kingdom could not. Yet reconciliation did not erase every problem. Some nobles deeply resented Rodrigo's return. Count Garcia Ordóñez certainly had not forgotten his capture years earlier. Others whispered that Rodrigo had grown too independent during exile, too wealthy, too famous, perhaps even too powerful. Court politics resumed almost immediately. Victory on battlefields rarely guaranteed peace inside palaces. Rodrigo found himself balancing military responsibility with political caution. He had learned much during exile. One lesson stood above the rest. A sword could defeat enemies. It could not silence jealous courtiers. For the moment, however, military affairs demanded attention. The frontier required strengthening. Fortresses needed repairs. Scouts watched southern roads constantly. Every report from Andalusia received careful examination. No one doubted the Almoravids would return. The only uncertainty involved when. Meanwhile, Rodrigo's reputation continued growing in unexpected ways. Among Muslim soldiers and rulers, the title first given in Zaragoza spread farther across Iberia. Al-Sayyid, the Lord. Spanish tongues gradually reshaped the Arabic pronunciation. El-Cid. It was not originally a title bestowed by Christian poets. It emerged from the respect, even admiration, of Muslim allies and opponents. Another reminder that history often ignores the neat categories later generations prefer. Rodrigo himself likely never imagined that this foreign title would become his immortal name. He remained, fundamentally, a soldier, a husband, a father, a landowner, a commander trying to navigate one of Europe's most complicated political landscapes. Yet destiny had begun moving him towards something greater than royal service. Far to the east lay a city unlike any other. Rich, beautiful, strategically priceless. Its fertile orchards stretched toward the Mediterranean. Its walls guarded thriving markets filled with silk, ceramics, spices, and precious metals. For centuries, merchants from across the known world had entered its gates. Its name was Valencia. Soon, every road Rodrigo traveled would lead there. And before many years had passed, he would attempt something almost unimaginable. Not merely serving a king, not merely defending a frontier, but conquering and ruling an independent kingdom of his own. The greatest chapter of El Cid's life was still ahead. The exile had returned. The warrior had earned forgiveness. Now the conqueror was about to emerge toward the city of Valencia. If you were to stand on the eastern coast of medieval Iberia just before sunrise, you would notice something very different from the dry plains of Castile. The air would feel softer. The breeze would carry the smell of salt instead of dust. Palm trees would sway gently beside irrigation canals that had carried water across the countryside for generations. Orange groves, though not yet the vast plantations of later centuries, filled the landscape with sweet fragrance. Almond trees covered the hillsides each spring with pale blossoms, while vineyards climbed gentle slopes overlooking the glittering Mediterranean. This was Valencia, a city where Roman foundations still rested beneath Islamic streets, where Christian merchants bargained with Muslim traders, where Jewish scholars copied manuscripts while shipbuilders hammered timber along the harbor, a place where cultures met not as strangers, but as neighbors, sometimes peacefully, sometimes not. Like nearly every important city in Iberia, Valencia had become part of the Taifa world after the collapse of the Caliphate of Córdoba. Rich farmland surrounded it, watered by one of the most sophisticated irrigation systems in medieval Europe. Water was wealth. Every canal represented prosperity. Every carefully maintained ditch meant another harvest. Farmers cultivated rice, wheat, olives, figs, grapes, and vegetables in astonishing abundance. Compared with the harsher landscapes of central Spain, Valencia seemed almost impossibly fertile. Naturally, everyone wanted it. Kings desired its taxes. Merchants desired its markets. Generals desired its strategic position. And ambitious nobles, well, they desired all of the above. By the late 1080s, the political situation surrounding Valencia had become wonderfully confusing. Or perhaps wonderfully chaotic would be the better phrase. Its Muslim rulers struggled to maintain independence while balancing pressure from powerful neighbors. Some favored alliances with Alfonso VI. Others preferred cooperation with the Almoravids. Still others hoped simply to survive another year without being invaded. It was an increasingly difficult ambition. Rodrigo Diaz entered this complicated world not as a conqueror. Not yet. Initially, Alfonso VI entrusted him with protecting Castilian interests along the eastern frontier. The assignment suited him perfectly. He understood frontier warfare. He understood diplomacy. Perhaps most importantly, he understood that influence often proved more valuable than immediate conquest. A city that surrendered peacefully remained far more profitable than one reduced to ashes. Rodrigo established himself carefully. Rather than rushing toward dramatic battles, he strengthened alliances with local rulers willing to cooperate. Some Muslim governors preferred dealing with Rodrigo instead of risking Almoravid domination. Others viewed him as the lesser of two dangers. History often presents remarkably uninspiring choices. Still, they are choices. Rodrigo built something unusual. Instead of relying solely upon knights from Castile, he assembled a remarkably diverse army. His household knights remained fiercely loyal, but alongside them rode Muslim cavalrymen from Zaragoza, local militias from eastern Spain, mercenaries seeking fortune, veteran archers, crossbowmen, engineers. Even experienced administrators joined his growing household. It became less an army belonging to one kingdom than a professional military community united by confidence in its commander. Shared success tends to inspire remarkable loyalty, especially when wages arrive on time. An often overlooked secret of military leadership. Rodrigo also understood intelligence, not the kind measured by books, the kind gathered through conversations. Messengers, merchants, pilgrims, travelers. Every visitor arriving from another city carried information. Who had married whom? Which ruler had fallen ill? Where had harvests failed? Which fortress lacked supplies? Sometimes an old merchant sitting comfortably over supper knew more about future wars than half the nobility. Rodrigo listened. He rarely acted blindly. Months gradually became years. His influence expanded across eastern Iberia. Cities negotiated rather than resisted. Smaller fortresses accepted his protection. Villages welcomed the stability his soldiers provided. Because despite the constant warfare, ordinary people desired something surprisingly simple: predictability. Farmers wished to harvest crops without raids. Merchants wanted safe roads. Families hoped children could sleep through the night without hearing alarm bells. Rodrigo increasingly offered that stability. His reputation spread beyond battlefields. He became known as a ruler who generally kept agreements. Firm, sometimes demanding, but reliable. In an age overflowing with broken promises, reliability became extraordinarily valuable. Meanwhile, events elsewhere continued reshaping Spain. The Almoravids had not forgotten Iberia. Yusuf ibn Tashfin returned repeatedly from North Africa, each expedition bringing larger armies. Unlike the Taifa rulers, the Almoravids possessed a long-term vision. They gradually absorbed the independent Muslim kingdoms one by one. At first they had arrived as rescuers. Soon they became conquerors. Several Taifa emirs who had invited Yusuf's assistance discovered they had effectively surrendered their own independence. One imagines some rather uncomfortable moments of realization. So they're staying. Yes. Forever. It appears so. History has a wicked sense of irony. The Almoravids justified their expansion through religious reform and political unity. Many ordinary Muslims welcomed stronger leadership after decades of division. Others regretted losing local autonomy. As always, history produced both winners and losers simultaneously. Valencia suddenly occupied a dangerous position, caught between Christian expansion from the north and Almoravid pressure from the south. Its rulers struggled desperately to preserve independence. Rodrigo watched patiently. Patience is often misunderstood. It is not an activity. It is choosing the correct moment. Military history repeatedly rewards commanders capable of waiting. Rodrigo possessed that rare ability. Instead of exhausting his forces through reckless campaigns, he strengthened surrounding castles, secured supply routes, collected tribute, expanded influence, allowed circumstances to evolve naturally. Some contemporaries probably mistook caution for hesitation. They were mistaken. By 1092, Valencia itself descended into political turmoil. Internal rivalries erupted. Factions competed for authority. The city expelled rulers, welcomed new ones, changed alliances, then reconsidered those alliances almost immediately. Imagine trying to govern while every influential family possessed a different opinion about the future. It rarely ends peacefully. An anti-Castilian faction eventually seized control. Supporters of the Almoravids gained influence. Rodrigo understood the consequences immediately. Valencia could no longer remain merely an ally. If the city became an Almoravid stronghold, eastern Spain would face permanent danger. He acted. Not impulsively. Methodically. Rodrigo marched toward Valencia. Rather than launching an immediate assault against its formidable walls, he surrounded the city. The siege began. Sieges represent one of history's least glamorous forms of warfare. Popular imagination favors dramatic assaults with ladders and battering rams. Reality usually involved waiting. Months of waiting. Sometimes years. Imagine life outside Valencia's walls. Thousands of tents stretching across open countryside. Smoke rising from countless cooking fires each evening. Blacksmiths repairing armor beneath temporary shelters. Horses grazing nearby. Children belonging to soldiers playing among wagons. Priests celebrating mass beneath simple wooden crosses. Merchants establishing little markets because wherever armies gather, commerce inevitably follows. Life continued. Inside Valencia, life became increasingly difficult. Food prices climbed. Bread grew scarce. Fresh meat disappeared first. Eventually, citizens relied upon whatever remained. Grain. Beans. Olives. Anything edible. Water remained available thanks to the city's sophisticated canals. But hunger steadily eroded morale. Disease followed malnutrition with predictable efficiency. Summer heat intensified every unpleasant smell. The air itself seemed heavy. Families rationed food carefully. Parents quietly skipped meals so children might eat. Nobody enjoyed sieges. Not attackers. Not defenders. Rodrigo maintained pressure. He blocked roads. Intercepted supply caravans. Captured surrounding fortresses. Gradually tightened the circle. His objective remained straightforward. Force surrender without destroying the city he hoped eventually to govern. Time favored him. The defenders knew it. Occasionally, desperate sorties erupted from Valencia's gates. Mounted warriors attempted to break through siege lines. Archers exchanged volleys. Brief, violent clashes disturbed otherwise monotonous weeks. Then silence returned. Waiting resumed. Rodrigo himself likely spent long evenings studying maps beneath flickering lamplight, consulting advisors, reviewing reports, writing letters. Command involved surprisingly large amounts of paperwork. Even medieval warfare required organization. Someone had to count supplies, arrange wages, repair equipment, set guard rotations. History remembers famous charges. Less often does it celebrate efficient inventory management. Though without the latter, the former rarely succeeded. As the siege lengthened, Rodrigo's authority over his followers strengthened further. He rewarded loyalty, punished indiscipline, maintained order. His army functioned less like a temporary feudal levy and more like a permanent professional force. That distinction would soon become decisive. Across Iberia, observers watched carefully. Could one exiled knight truly capture one of Spain's richest cities? Many doubted it. Others quietly began believing. Within Valencia's walls, hope diminished month after month. Outside, Rodrigo's confidence slowly hardened into certainty. The city could not hold forever. Every sunrise brought the defenders one day closer to surrender. Every sunset reminded them supplies continued shrinking. The Mediterranean shimmered peacefully beyond the walls, indifferent to human suffering. Ships sailed across its blue waters. Seabirds circled above the harbor. Waves whispered against the shore exactly as they had for centuries. Nature remained astonishingly unconcerned with politics. Rodrigo often rode along the siege lines during quiet evenings. Perhaps he looked toward Valencia's elegant towers glowing beneath the setting sun. Perhaps he imagined governing the city rather than surrounding it. Perhaps he simply wondered how much longer hunger would resist his patience. He had traveled a remarkable road, from young knight to royal champion, to exile, to mercenary commander. Now he stood upon the threshold of becoming something almost unheard of, not merely serving kings, becoming one. Very soon, the gates of Valencia would open, and the name El Cid would cease being only the title of a great warrior. It would become the title of a ruler. The greatest achievement of Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar was almost within reach: the conquest of Valencia. There comes a point in every siege when silence becomes more frightening than battle. Not because the arrows have stopped flying, not because the swords have grown dull, but because everyone, on both sides of the walls, understands the same uncomfortable truth. Time has chosen its winner. The spring of 1094 arrived gently along the Mediterranean coast. Wildflowers spread across the hills outside Valencia as though the countryside had forgotten that thousands of armed men were living among them. Bright red poppies nodded in the breeze beside abandoned vineyards. Bees drifted lazily through orchards that no farmer could safely tend. The sea sparkled beneath cloudless skies, carrying merchant ships that kept well away from the city, unwilling to risk becoming entangled in someone else's war. Nature, as always, remained magnificently indifferent. Inside Valencia, however, life had become desperate. The city's granaries stood nearly empty. Markets that had once overflowed with figs, almonds, olives, spices, and fresh fish now displayed little more than handfuls of grain and whatever vegetables citizens could still grow in hidden gardens. Bread became precious. Meat had disappeared long ago. Horses that had once carried noblemen proudly through the city's streets had quietly become meals. Even the city's stray dogs had become increasingly difficult to find. History seldom lingers upon these details. Yet hunger shapes history every bit as much as swords. Parents measured tiny portions with trembling hands. Children asked questions adults could no longer answer honestly. Old men remembered prosperous years that suddenly seemed impossibly distant. The city's beautiful fountains still flowed. Its elegant mosques still stood. Its walls remained impressive. But magnificent buildings cannot feed empty stomachs. Outside the city, Rodrigo Díaz maintained the discipline that had carried him this far. His army was tired. There could be no doubt about that. Months of campaigning wore down even the strongest soldiers. Armor required constant repair. Horses needed fresh fodder. Men missed their homes. Some had wives and children waiting in distant villages. Others had begun this campaign as young recruits and were now hardened veterans with scars to prove it. Yet remarkably few deserted. That said something about Rodrigo's leadership. A commander cannot force loyalty forever. Eventually men choose whether to remain. His soldiers stayed. Partly because he paid them. Partly because he usually won. Mostly because they believed he knew exactly what he was doing. Confidence can become contagious. Rodrigo understood something that many medieval commanders never fully appreciated. A successful siege depended as much upon psychology as military strength. Every messenger captured. Every supply wagon intercepted. Every failed attempt to break through the encirclement slowly weakened hope inside the city. Hope, once lost, proved almost impossible to restore. He also avoided unnecessary cruelty. The surrounding countryside suffered, as it always did during medieval warfare, but Rodrigo resisted pointless destruction. He intended to rule Valencia. A wise ruler does not burn the fields that will eventually feed his own people. Nor does he slaughter the merchants whose taxes will someday support his government. Practicality often appears surprisingly humane. One morning, scouts arrived with alarming news. Dust clouds rose far to the south. An Almoravid relief force was approaching. The defenders inside Valencia rejoiced. At last, salvation. Or so they hoped. The Almoravid commanders certainly understood the importance of Valencia. Allowing Rodrigo to capture such a wealthy city would strengthen Christian influence across the eastern coast enormously. They intended to stop him. Rodrigo reacted with characteristic speed. Rather than abandoning the siege, he divided his attention carefully. Part of his army maintained pressure against Valencia. The rest prepared to intercept the approaching relief force. Imagine the tension. The siege had already lasted for months. Victory seemed close enough to touch. Now everything depended upon another battle. Lose here, and months of effort might vanish. Win, and the city would stand alone. The opposing armies met near Cuarte. Morning mist hung low across the fields as cavalry assembled beneath fluttering banners. The Almoravid army possessed experienced soldiers, many veterans of campaigns across North Africa and southern Spain. They expected another victory like Sagraja's. After all, they had already humbled Alfonso VI. Why should this exiled knight prove any different? Rodrigo intended to answer that question personally. The battle unfolded with remarkable intensity. The Almoravids launched determined attacks, attempting to overwhelm Rodrigo's forces through disciplined infantry supported by swift cavalry. For a time, the outcome remained uncertain. Dust filled the air. War cries echoed across open fields. Lances splintered against shields. Archers loosed clouds of arrows that darkened the morning sky. Then Rodrigo struck. His cavalry executed a carefully timed counterattack against a vulnerable section of the Almoravid line. Years of campaigning had taught him exactly when an enemy's confidence became overextension. His horsemen charged. Steel flashed beneath the Mediterranean sun. The impact shattered the Almoravid formation. Confusion spread rapidly. Once disciplined ranks dissolved into scattered groups struggling simply to survive. The relief army retreated. Valencia was alone. News of the defeat reached the city with devastating effect. Any lingering hope evaporated. Citizens understood what the battle meant. No army remained to rescue them. No hidden reserve waited beyond the horizon. The siege would end only one way. Negotiations resumed. Rodrigo did not demand total destruction. He offered terms. Those willing to accept his authority would receive protection. Life could continue. Property would largely remain respected. The transition would not be painless. But neither would it become a massacre. Considering the standards of medieval warfare, these were generous conditions. On the 15th of June, 1094, after nearly a year of siege, Valencia surrendered. Imagine the moment. The city's great gates slowly opened. Not with dramatic explosions. Not beneath triumphant music. Simply with the groaning sound of ancient wood swinging inward after months of remaining firmly closed. Rodrigo rode forward. Beside him marched trusted knights carrying banners that fluttered gently in the warm sea breeze. The soldiers entered cautiously. Victorious armies often feared traps. Citizens watched silently from windows and rooftops. Some looked frightened. Others merely exhausted. Many wondered what tomorrow would bring. Rodrigo entered one of the richest cities in Iberia, not as a servant, not as a mercenary, but as its ruler. It is difficult to overstate the extraordinary nature of this achievement. He had not inherited Valencia. He had not received it as a royal gift. He had taken it through military skill, political patience, and relentless determination. An exiled knight had created a principality of his own. Few men in medieval Europe accomplished anything comparable. The city itself remained magnificent. Broad streets wound between whitewashed buildings whose upper floors shaded pedestrians from the fierce summer sun. Markets soon reopened. Merchants cautiously returned. The harbor filled once again with vessels arriving from Italy, North Africa, and the Western Mediterranean. Life resumed. Slowly. Carefully. Rodrigo immediately faced challenges greater than conquest itself. Winning a city and governing one are entirely different skills. The population remained overwhelmingly Muslim. Christians formed only a minority. A substantial Jewish community also called Valencia home. Each group possessed its own traditions, religious institutions, laws, and expectations. Heavy-handed rule would almost certainly provoke rebellion. Rodrigo chose another path. He preserved much of the existing administrative system. Muslim officials continued serving where practical. Taxes remained organized efficiently. Agriculture resumed. Trade flourished. Churches were restored for Christian worship, while many Muslim communities retained significant religious freedoms. It was not perfect coexistence. Nothing in the Middle Ages ever was. But compared with many contemporary conquests, Rodrigo's government displayed remarkable pragmatism. Stability produced prosperity. Prosperity produced revenue. Revenue paid soldiers. The cycle benefited everyone. Well, almost everyone. The Almoravids were furious. Valencia's fall represented more than the loss of one city. It symbolized the emergence of a dangerous new power. Rodrigo now controlled a wealthy Mediterranean port. Its fertile countryside supplied food. Its taxes financed armies. Its walls protected one of the strongest fortresses in eastern Spain. More importantly, El Cid had demonstrated that the Almoravids could be defeated. That lesson worried them deeply. Meanwhile, Alfonso VI watched developments with mixed emotions. On one hand, Valencia remained technically outside direct royal control. Rodrigo governed almost independently. On the other hand, the city served as a powerful Christian bulwark against Almoravid expansion. Practicality again outweighed pride. The king recognized Rodrigo's authority. Their relationship became something unusual, neither complete independence nor simple feudal obedience. A partnership built upon mutual necessity. Rodrigo had effectively become one of the great princes of Iberia. Within Valencia, daily life slowly normalized. Children once again played in shaded courtyards. Craftsmen reopened workshops. The scent of baking bread returned to neighborhood ovens. Shipbuilders resumed work along the harbor. Evening prayers rose from different places of worship, carried together upon the same sea breeze. Peace, though fragile, had returned. Rodrigo himself established his household within the city. At last, his wife Jimena and their children could join him permanently. Years earlier, he had left them in the safety of a monastery, uncertain whether he would ever see them again. Now he welcomed them into a city that belonged to him. One imagines the reunion carried far more emotion than any chronicler bothered to describe. History enjoys recording battles. Families usually receive fewer pages. Yet perhaps those quiet reunions matter even more. The warrior who had spent years sleeping beneath tents and castle roofs now finally possessed something resembling a home. Though home, remained surrounded by enemies. Every ruler of Valencia understood one unavoidable reality. The Almoravids would return. They would return with larger armies, greater determination, and a singular purpose: to destroy the kingdom El Cid had built. Rodrigo surely understood this as he walked the city's walls during calm Mediterranean evenings, looking south, watching the horizon, knowing that beyond it, another storm was already gathering. The conquest had been extraordinary. Keeping Valencia would prove even harder. And the greatest test of El Cid Campeador still lay ahead. Lord of Valencia. There is a quiet kind of victory that arrives not with trumpets or cheering crowds, but with ordinary mornings. A baker opening his oven before sunrise. A fisherman pushing his boat into calm water. Children laughing in streets that only months earlier echoed with the sounds of war. For Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, these ordinary mornings became far more meaningful than the thunder of cavalry charges. Because conquering a city was only the beginning. Keeping it alive, that was the true challenge. As summer settled over Valencia in 1094, the city slowly rediscovered its rhythm. The siege had left scars everywhere. Walls needed repairs. Homes damaged during months of uncertainty required rebuilding. Warehouses stood half empty. Fields beyond the city had been neglected while armies surrounded them. Canals clogged with weeds waited for laborers to restore the precious flow of water. Yet the Mediterranean climate remained generous. Warm sunshine filled the orchards. The Turia River continued its patient journey toward the sea. Given peace, the land was eager to heal. Rodrigo understood this instinctively. He had spent enough years campaigning to know that prosperity created stronger defenses than fear alone. A hungry city could not remain loyal. A prosperous one usually preferred stability over rebellion. And so, instead of ruling solely with the sword, he ruled with administration. It sounds considerably less dramatic. History books rarely devote entire chapters to tax collection. Perhaps they should. Empires have often survived because someone remembered to organize grain storage properly. Valencia's existing bureaucracy remained largely intact. Experienced Muslim officials continued overseeing many aspects of local government. Jewish merchants resumed trading across the Mediterranean. Christian settlers gradually arrived from the north, encouraged by the city's growing stability. Instead of destroying the machinery of government, Rodrigo simply became the man directing it. Pragmatism once again triumphed over ideology. Different communities continued living beside one another. Arabic remained widely spoken. Latin appeared in official documents. Romance dialects echoed through the markets. Religious festivals followed different calendars. Some families fasted during Ramadan. Others celebrated Christian feast days. Jewish communities observed the Sabbath. It was not always peaceful. Disagreements certainly occurred. But compared with the endless violence surrounding Valencia, coexistence offered undeniable advantages. Imagine walking through the city's central market one autumn morning. The streets are alive with movement. A spice merchant from Alexandria arranges fragrant sacks of cinnamon, cumin, pepper, and saffron. Nearby, a Jewish goldsmith carefully displays delicate rings and finely worked silver cups. Christian farmers unload carts overflowing with grapes, onions, wheat, and olives harvested from nearby fields. Arabic mingles with Castilian. Laughter rises above the noise of bargaining. Somewhere a musician plays a reed flute. Children weave through the crowds, chasing one another while their mothers pretend not to notice. The scent of roasting lamb drifts from an open kitchen. Fresh bread cools upon wooden tables. For the first time in many months, Valencia feels alive again. Rodrigo often rode through these streets without excessive ceremony. Unlike later kings surrounded by elaborate courts, El Cid governed as a military lord accustomed to practical matters. He inspected fortifications personally, reviewed construction projects, met local officials, listened to petitions, examined supplies. A commander who ignores details rarely commands for very long. His household became something remarkable in medieval Europe. Veteran knights from Castile dined beside Muslim officers who had served him faithfully for years. Mercenaries from different regions shared stories over evening meals. Clerics debated scripture while physicians discussed medicine. No one would have described Valencia as a perfect paradise, but it possessed an atmosphere unlike any other Christian principality on the peninsula. Shared loyalty to Rodrigo frequently mattered more than shared ancestry. That loyalty did not emerge by accident. Rodrigo rewarded competence. Bravery received recognition. Service brought opportunity. Many soldiers who had once followed him into exile now occupied respected positions within the city. They had gambled everything upon one man. Remarkably, the gamble had succeeded. Still, beneath this appearance of prosperity lingered constant tension. Watchtowers along the frontier remained occupied day and night. Scouts patrolled roads leading south. Messenger horses stood saddled, ready at a moment's notice. The Almoravids had suffered defeat at Cuarte. No sensible commander believed they would quietly accept the loss forever. The Mediterranean itself brought reminders of danger. Merchant captains arriving from North Africa carried rumors. Large armies assembling. New commanders appointed. Shipyards working without pause. Stories traveled across the sea almost as quickly as the ships themselves. Every report sounded similar. The Almoravids were preparing. Rodrigo prepared as well. Valencia's walls underwent continuous improvement. Engineers strengthened gates. Stone masons repaired towers damaged during the siege. New supplies filled granaries. Weapons accumulated in armories. Blacksmiths labored from dawn until dusk producing spearheads, horseshoes, arrowheads, and replacement mail links. Nothing was left to chance. Or at least, as little as possible. The countryside surrounding Valencia became equally important. Rodrigo recognized that cities depended upon villages. Villages depended upon farms. Farms depended upon water. The famous irrigation canals of Valencia required constant maintenance. Teams of laborers cleared sediment, repaired embankments, strengthened channels. Water flowed once more through orchards and vegetable gardens. Harvests improved. With harvest came taxes. With taxes came soldiers' wages. History often hides its greatest victories inside irrigation systems. Perhaps civilization itself always has. Rodrigo also encouraged the settlement of Christian families from northern Spain. Some came seeking opportunity. Others hoped for land. Many had lost relatives during decades of warfare and wished to begin new lives. The city gradually became more diverse than ever before. Different customs blended. Different architectural styles appeared. Church bells joined older calls to prayer in shaping the rhythm of daily life. Yet despite these changes, Rodrigo largely avoided forced conversions. Such policies would likely have triggered widespread unrest. Practical governance again outweighed religious zeal. Not everyone admired this approach. Some church leaders hoped for more aggressive Christianization. Certain nobles believed Muslim communities should lose greater privileges. Rodrigo listened politely, then generally did what seemed most likely to preserve stability. He had become less an idealist than a realist. Exile teaches difficult lessons. One of them is that survival often demands compromise. Far away in Leon, Alfonso VI continued balancing his own kingdom against the growing Almoravid threat. Relations between the king and Rodrigo remained cordial, though somewhat unusual. Officially, Rodrigo remained Alfonso's vassal. In practice, Valencia functioned almost independently. The arrangement benefited both men. Alfonso gained a powerful ally protecting eastern Spain. Rodrigo retained remarkable freedom. Neither felt much desire to disturb an agreement that clearly worked. Occasionally ambassadors arrived from other kingdoms. Some sought alliances. Others gathered information. A few simply wished to meet the increasingly legendary El Cid. Stories about him had grown steadily more extraordinary. Each retelling added another layer. One tale claimed no enemy knight could face him in single combat. Another insisted his sword carried divine favor. Some whispered that he had never truly lost a battle. Reality remained impressive enough without embellishment. Yet people have always preferred legends. Perhaps because legends offer certainty. Real human beings rarely do. Rodrigo himself had become noticeably older. The young knight who once rode eagerly into King Sancho's service now carried decades of campaigning upon his shoulders. Scars marked his body. Gray hairs likely appeared beneath his helmet. Old injuries probably ached during damp winter mornings. Medieval warfare rarely allowed retirement without physical reminders. Even so, those who met him continued describing remarkable energy. Experience compensated for any slowing of youthful speed. He had learned patience. Perhaps that was his greatest weapon. Victory rarely belonged to whoever charged first. It belonged to whoever understood the battlefield best. Evenings inside Valencia could be surprisingly peaceful. Imagine Rodrigo standing atop the city walls as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the western hills. The Mediterranean reflects brilliant shades of orange and crimson. Fishing boats return quietly toward the harbor. Smoke rises from hundreds of evening fires. Church bells echo gently across rooftops. Somewhere beyond the city, farmers guide oxen home after another day's work. Children's laughter drifts upward through narrow streets. For a moment, war seems impossibly distant. Then a scout arrives. Dusty. Tired. Urgent. Another Almoravid army has crossed into Iberia. The reports grow more frequent. Larger armies. Better organized. Determined commanders. This time, they are not merely responding to Christian expansion. They have a specific target. Valencia. The city Rodrigo has fought so hard to build. The city that has become a symbol. If Valencia falls, the dream of an independent Christian lordship on the Mediterranean may fall with it. If it survives, the legend of El Cid will become something even greater. The years ahead will demand everything Rodrigo possesses. His courage. His experience. His leadership. Perhaps even his life. The Lord of Valencia has won his greatest prize. Now he must defend it against an empire. And history is preparing its next, and perhaps greatest, test. Against the Almoravid tide. There is an old truth that soldiers in every century eventually learn. Winning a city is difficult. Keeping it is exhausting. Every sunrise brings another patrol, another report, another repair to a crumbling wall, another rumor carried by frightened merchants or weary travelers. Victory, it turns out, demands constant maintenance. For Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, now Lord of Valencia, the years after the conquest became a relentless struggle against an enemy that seemed almost endless. The Almoravid Empire had no intention of accepting defeat. From their perspective, Valencia was more than a wealthy Mediterranean city. It was a wound, a challenge to their authority. A reminder that the Christian commander they had underestimated had not only defeated their armies, but established an independent realm and territory they considered part of Al-Andalus. That insult could not remain unanswered. Far to the south, in Marrakesh, Yusuf ibn Tashfin continued strengthening his empire. He was no reckless conqueror driven only by ambition. He governed patiently, methodically. North Africa had been brought under his authority through years of careful campaigning, religious reform, and disciplined administration. When he looked across the Strait of Gibraltar toward Iberia, he did not see isolated kingdoms. He saw unfinished business. Each expedition into Spain became larger than the last. Fresh soldiers crossed the sea. Supply caravans followed. Experienced commanders replaced defeated ones. The Almoravid machine continued moving forward. Slowly. Steadily. Relentlessly. Rodrigo understood the danger perhaps better than anyone. Unlike many Christian nobles, he had fought alongside Muslim allies for years. He knew their strengths. He respected their discipline. Underestimating the Almoravids would have been a fatal mistake, so he refused to underestimate them. Every fortress surrounding Valencia received new attention. Watchtowers remained occupied day and night. Signal fires were prepared atop distant hills. If enemy forces appeared, news could travel astonishing distances through smoke by day and flame by night. Long before modern communications, people had become remarkably creative. Human beings have always disliked unpleasant surprises. The countryside surrounding Valencia transformed into a carefully organized defensive network. Small castles guarded roads leading inland. Villages maintained emergency supplies. Mounted patrols rode constantly between settlements. Messengers knew exactly which routes offered the fastest escape should invasion begin. Nothing was left entirely to chance. Although, as history repeatedly demonstrates, chance has an irritating habit of appearing anyway. Rodrigo's own household had grown considerably. His army now included seasoned veterans who had followed him through exile, campaigns in Zaragoza, the Siege of Valencia, and countless smaller engagements. Many were no longer young. Their armor carried dents accumulated over decades. Their horses had become trusted companions rather than mere military equipment. Scars crossed weathered faces. They had survived because they learned caution without surrendering courage. Around evening campfires, they likely spoke less about glory than they once had. Older soldiers rarely romanticize war. They remember too much. Life inside Valencia settled into something approaching normality. Markets flourished once again. Ships from Pisa, Genoa, Barcelona, and Muslim ports arrived carrying timber, iron, spices, cloth, and grain. Merchants cared remarkably little about politics so long as profits remained healthy. Trade possesses its own diplomacy. The city's craftsmen became famous for ceramics, textiles, leather goods, and finely worked metal. Agriculture recovered quickly. The irrigation canals, those masterpieces of engineering inherited through generations of Roman and Islamic innovation, continued transforming dry Mediterranean soil into astonishingly fertile farmland. Water wheels creaked gently beside flowing canals. Farmers rose before sunrise. Women gathered vegetables beneath wide-brimmed hats. Children chased goats through orchards heavy with figs and pomegranates. The peaceful rhythm almost allowed one to forget armies existed. Almost. Because beyond the southern horizon, the storm continued gathering. In the year 1097, that storm finally arrived. A large Almoravid army marched toward Valencia once again. Their commanders intended nothing less than crushing Rodrigo's independent lordship forever. This would not merely be another raid. It would be a campaign of reconquest. News reached Valencia days before the enemy appeared. Scouts galloped through the city gates with exhausted horses covered in sweat and dust. Church bells rang urgently. Workshops emptied. Farmers abandoned distant fields, driving livestock behind the city's defenses. Merchants hurriedly secured warehouses. Children watched adults with confused expressions. Even they understood something important was happening. The city prepared for siege. Once again. Imagine Valencia from above during those frantic days. Thousands of people moving with determined purpose. Blacksmiths hammering spearheads late into the night. Carpenters repairing gates. Women baking enormous quantities of bread before flour supplies became precious. Priests praying. Physicians gathering herbs and medical instruments. Archers testing bowstrings atop the walls. The entire city breathing together like one enormous living creature. Rodrigo moved through it calmly. That calmness mattered. Panic spreads quickly. Confidence spreads just as quickly. Experienced commanders know which emotion serves an army better. The Almoravid force eventually approached from the south. Dust rose behind thousands of marching soldiers. Horsemen rode ahead of the main army. Colorful banners fluttered beneath the blazing Mediterranean sun. Veterans recognized the disciplined formations immediately. These were not frightened recruits. They were professional soldiers. Rodrigo faced a difficult decision. Remain inside Valencia's walls and endure another siege? Or meet the enemy before they could fully surround the city? He chose movement. Waiting behind walls surrendered initiative. Rodrigo preferred deciding where battles occurred. The opposing armies met near the small settlement of Byron. The landscape offered rolling hills overlooking the Mediterranean coast. To one side lay the sea. To the other rose rough ground broken by ridges and rocky slopes. It was terrain favoring a commander who understood flexibility. Rodrigo did. The battle began beneath brilliant autumn sunlight. The Almoravids advanced confidently, believing superior numbers would eventually overwhelm the defenders. Their infantry pressed steadily forward. Archers filled the air with arrows. War drums echoed across the hillsides. Rodrigo waited. Patience. Again. One of the defining qualities of his military career. He studied the battlefield, watched enemy movements, allowed them to commit themselves. Then he struck. His cavalry descended from higher ground with devastating force. Heavy horses thundered downhill. Lances lowered. The impact shattered portions of the advancing Almoravid line. Before they could recover, Rodrigo launched additional attacks from different directions. Confusion spread rapidly. The discipline that usually distinguished Almoravid armies began to fracture. Soldiers struggling uphill suddenly found mounted knights crashing into their flanks. Dust swallowed visibility. Commands became difficult to hear. Momentum shifted. By late afternoon, the Almoravid army withdrew. Another victory belonged to El Cid. It was not necessarily his largest battle, nor perhaps his bloodiest. Yet strategically it mattered enormously. Valencia remained secure. The Almoravids had once again failed to destroy Rodrigo's kingdom. News spread rapidly across Iberia. Christian courts celebrated. Muslim chroniclers acknowledged the defeat, though often reluctantly. Even enemies increasingly accepted an uncomfortable reality. Rodrigo Díaz possessed extraordinary military ability. Legends multiplied accordingly. Some stories claimed angels had appeared above his army. Others insisted St. James himself had fought beside him. Medieval people loved miraculous explanations. The actual explanation proved rather more human. Preparation. Experience. Leadership. Timing. Not quite as dramatic. Far more useful. Meanwhile, Rodrigo's family continued building their life inside Valencia. His wife Jimena increasingly assumed important responsibilities within the household. She had endured years of uncertainty during exile, long separations, political danger. Now she occupied the position of lady of one of the richest cities in Spain. Yet comfort remained fragile. She knew better than anyone that one disastrous battle could erase everything. Their daughters also reached adulthood during these years. Marriages among noble families rarely centered upon romance. They strengthened alliances, created political stability, connected powerful houses through blood rather than treaties. Rodrigo carefully considered their futures. His victories had elevated his family's status enormously. The son of a relatively modest Castilian noble now negotiated marriages with some of the greatest aristocratic families of Christian Spain. Fortune had turned remarkably. Yet perhaps Rodrigo himself had changed even more. The fiery young knight serving King Sancho had gradually become something else. A statesman. A governor. A diplomat. Still a warrior. Always a warrior. But now responsible for tens of thousands of lives beyond his own soldiers. Every decision affected merchants, farmers, craftsmen, widows, children, and pilgrims. The weight of command had grown immeasurably heavier. One suspects he understood that. History often remembers the victories, less often the sleepless nights preceding them. As winter approached after Byron, Valencia celebrated cautiously. Harvests had been protected. Trade continued. The city survived. Once again, Rodrigo rode along the walls during quiet evenings much as he always had. Below him, lamps gradually appeared in narrow streets. The harbor reflected moonlight. The sea whispered gently against the shore. Everything appeared peaceful, but he almost certainly knew peace would never last. The Almoravid Empire remained powerful. Yusuf ibn Tashfin remained determined. Age, too, had become an enemy impossible to defeat. Rodrigo was approaching 60 years old. By medieval standards, he had already lived an exceptionally long and astonishingly active life. His body carried the memory of every campaign, every wound, every cold winter spent beneath canvas, every exhausting march beneath the Spanish sun. Even the greatest warrior cannot bargain forever with time. Another battle would come, perhaps several. But destiny had quietly begun preparing its final chapter. The legend of El Cid had reached its greatest height. Soon, history would ask one final sacrifice of the man who had spent a lifetime refusing to surrender. The last campaigns of El Cid. There comes a season in every warrior's life when the armor grows heavier. Not because the steel has changed. The mail weighs exactly what it always did. The sword hangs from the belt with familiar balance. The horse still responds to the slightest movement of the reins. No, the difference is carried inside the man. Old wounds stiffen on cold mornings. Scars ache before rain arrives. A shoulder injured decades earlier quietly reminds its owner that time has never truly forgotten. Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar had reached that season. By the late 1090s, he had become one of the most famous men in all of Iberia. Christian pilgrims spoke his name with admiration. Muslim chroniclers described him with reluctant respect. Merchants repeated stories of his victories while resting beside roadside inns. Minstrels had already begun polishing reality into legend. Some songs exaggerated his strength. Others multiplied the number of enemies he defeated. A few probably gave him speeches he never delivered. History and storytelling had started their familiar dance. Rodrigo, meanwhile, continued living an ordinary daily routine, remarkably unlike the legends growing around him. He woke before sunrise, met with advisors, reviewed reports from frontier scouts, inspected soldiers, discussed repairs to city walls, settled disputes over land and taxes, listened patiently to merchants complaining about tariffs, listened somewhat less patiently to nobles complaining about one another. The responsibilities of governing rarely resembled heroic poetry, yet they occupied most of his time. Valencia had become more than a military outpost. It was a functioning principality. Ships crowded its harbor carrying cargo from across the Mediterranean. Italian merchants arrived from Pisa and Genoa. Catalan traders negotiated contracts beside Muslim shipowners. Silks from the eastern Mediterranean passed through its warehouses. Salted fish, olive oil, wine, leather, ceramics, and wool traveled in the opposite direction. The city generated wealth, and wealth inevitably attracted attention, not only from kings, from pirates as well. The Mediterranean had always been a sea of opportunity. It had also always been a sea of danger. Small pirate vessels occasionally prowled the coastline searching for vulnerable merchant ships. Rodrigo strengthened Valencia's harbor defenses accordingly. Watchtowers overlooked the sea. Harbor chains could restrict entry during emergencies. Naval patrols, though modest compared with later centuries, helped discourage opportunistic raiders. Security meant commerce. Commerce meant prosperity. Prosperity meant survival. It was all connected. Beyond the city walls, life continued much as it had for generations. Farmers tended vineyards beneath the brilliant Mediterranean sun. Irrigation canals carried fresh water through orchards heavy with figs, olives, and almonds. Goat herds guided their animals across rocky hillsides where rosemary and wild thyme scented the warm air. At harvest time, entire families worked together from dawn until dusk. Children gathered fallen olives. Women sorted grapes. Men repaired stone terraces damaged by winter rains. The ordinary people of Valencia measured time not by battles, but by seasons. Spring planting, summer irrigation, autumn harvest, winter repairs. Rodrigo understood that protecting these rhythms mattered as much as winning battles. A ruler who defended only castles eventually ruled empty land. He encouraged the repair of roads damaged during years of warfare. Bridges received maintenance. Local markets reopened fully. Travel between villages gradually became safer. Not perfectly safe. This was still the Middle Ages. Travelers rarely expected perfect safety, but safer than before. Sometimes progress is measured in small improvements rather than dramatic transformations. Meanwhile, the Almoravid Empire continued expanding elsewhere across Iberia. One Taifa kingdom after another disappeared beneath Yusuf ibn Tashfin's authority. Many Muslim rulers who had once governed independently now answered to North African governors. The political landscape changed almost every year. Only Valencia remained stubbornly outside Almoravid control. It stood like an island. A Christian lord ruling a largely Muslim city surrounded by increasingly hostile territory. The position demanded constant vigilance. Every caravan arriving from the south carried news. Every ambassador brought rumors. Every captured messenger revealed another fragment of a much larger picture. Rodrigo studied them all. He had become something more than a battlefield commander. He had become an intelligence analyst centuries before anyone invented the title. His greatest weapon was often information. During these years, his daughters entered important marriages that connected the house of El Cid to powerful noble families. His eldest daughter, Cristina, married into the Kingdom of Navarre. His younger daughter, Maria, married a Count of Barcelona, helping heal an old rivalry that had once seen Rodrigo capture the Count himself. History possesses an elegant sense of symmetry. The family that had once rejected the exiled knight now became connected to him by marriage. One imagines Rodrigo appreciating the irony. He had never seemed particularly interested in revenge. He preferred usefulness. Marriage could accomplish what battles often could not. Peace. At least for a while. His household reflected the diversity of Valencia itself. Christian priests celebrated Mass within restored churches. Muslim officials continued managing aspects of local administration. Jewish physicians cared for patients regardless of religion. Interpreters moved constantly between languages. The Great Hall echoed with conversations in Castilian, Arabic, Latin, and several regional dialects. It was a frontier court unlike any other in Europe. Messy. Complicated. Practical. Entirely medieval. As Rodrigo aged, younger commanders increasingly assumed responsibility for leading individual detachments. He still directed strategy. He still inspired confidence. But no commander, however gifted, can personally fight every skirmish forever. Leadership means teaching others to continue after you are gone. Whether he consciously recognized that lesson is impossible to know. His actions suggest he did. Then came another crisis. In 1099, intelligence reports confirmed what everyone had expected. The Almoravids were once again organizing major operations against Valencia. The city had survived repeated attacks. Its ruler had humiliated imperial armies. Enough was enough. This time, the pressure would be relentless. Rodrigo ordered another inspection of Valencia's defenses. Stone walls were reinforced. Food stores expanded. Arrow stockpiles increased dramatically. Fresh horses were purchased wherever possible. Engineers strengthened towers overlooking vulnerable approaches. Veteran soldiers supervised new recruits. No one underestimated what lay ahead. Yet something had changed. Not in the city. In Rodrigo himself. He was now around 56 years old. Today that might not seem particularly old. For an 11th century knight who had spent decades campaigning, it was remarkable. Most warriors never reached such an age. Those who did rarely remained active commanders. Years of battle had exacted their price. Chroniclers do not provide detailed medical records. History seldom preserves that kind of information. Still, it seems increasingly likely Rodrigo suffered from recurring illness during his final months. Perhaps old wounds had become infected. Perhaps chronic disease slowly weakened him. Perhaps simple exhaustion after decades of campaigning finally demanded repayment. Whatever the cause, his strength began declining. Even legends grow tired. Imagine one quiet evening atop Valencia's walls. The sea lies calm beneath the setting sun. Fishing boats return toward the harbor. Smoke rises gently from thousands of household fires. The city Rodrigo built stretches peacefully below. Children race through narrow streets. Merchants close their shops. Church bells ring softly across the rooftops. For a moment, everything appears exactly as he dreamed. One wonders what he thought. Did he remember the monastery where he had left Jimena so many years earlier? Did he think about King Sancho, dead before either man reached old age? Did he recall his first exile from Castile? Or perhaps, like many older soldiers, he simply enjoyed the silence. There are moments when memory requires no words, only stillness. His advisors almost certainly noticed the changes. He tired more easily. Meetings ended earlier. Long rides became less frequent. The burden of command gradually shifted toward trusted lieutenants. No proclamation announced this transition. Leadership often changes quietly. Rodrigo himself probably resisted admitting weakness. Warriors generally do, especially those who have spent a lifetime appearing unbreakable. But time is remarkably patient. It never loses. In July of 1099, after a life that had reshaped the history of medieval Spain, Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar fell gravely ill. The conqueror of Valencia, the exile who became a prince, the knight called El Cid, the man who had survived kings, sieges, betrayals, and countless battles, now faced an opponent against whom no sword could prevail. Death had finally arrived. Not on a battlefield beneath waving banners, not in glorious single combat, but quietly, as it so often does. The greatest warrior of medieval Spain had reached the end of his journey. Yet strangely, his final victory had not yet been won. Because after Rodrigo's last breath, one of history's most enduring legends was only beginning. The death of El Cid and the birth of a legend. The summer air over Valencia was warm and still. Outside the city walls, cicadas sang from olive trees exactly as they had every summer for centuries. The Mediterranean shimmered beneath an endless blue sky, its waves rolling gently against the shore without the slightest concern for kings, warriors, or the rise and fall of kingdoms. Inside the city, however, the atmosphere had changed. The great hall was quieter. Messengers spoke in hushed voices. Soldiers who had faced charging cavalry without fear now glanced nervously toward the residence of their lord. Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar was dying. There are countless stories about how great warriors meet their end. Many imagine one final battle, one last heroic charge, a dramatic speech delivered beneath storm-darkened skies. Reality rarely follows such scripts. The historical Rodrigo most likely died after a period of illness on July 10, 1099, surrounded not by thousands of cheering soldiers, but by family, trusted companions, clergy, and household servants who had shared decades of hardship with him. No battlefield, no crashing swords, only the quiet sounds of a city holding its breath. His wife, Jimena Diaz, was almost certainly beside him. She had endured exile, uncertainty, separation, and years of constant warfare. Few people had witnessed Rodrigo's transformation more closely. She had known him before the songs, before the legends, before Europe began calling him El Cid. To her, he remained Rodrigo, the man who had once ridden away from the monastery at Cardena, uncertain whether he would ever return. Around them stood men who had followed him through nearly 20 years of campaigning. Some had entered his service as young squires. Now their own hair had turned gray. Their faces carried scars earned beneath Rodrigo's command. They had crossed mountains together, shared freezing winter camps, celebrated victories, buried friends. Their commander had become something more than a lord. He had become the center around which their entire lives revolved. And now that center was disappearing. One imagines the silence. Not uncomfortable. Simply heavy. The kind of silence in which every creaking floorboard sounds impossibly loud. Somewhere outside, church bells marked another hour. A horse stamped in the courtyard. The sea breeze drifted through an open window carrying the scent of salt and orange blossoms. Life continued. It always does. Rodrigo's death presented an immediate political crisis. His personal authority had held Valencia together. Kings inherit kingdoms through established succession. Rodrigo had built his by force of personality, military genius, and relentless determination. Could anyone else truly replace him? Probably not. Jimena assumed leadership. This alone deserves far greater attention than it often receives. In an age dominated by powerful men, she accepted responsibility for governing one of the most contested cities in Iberia. The situation she inherited bordered on impossible. The Almoravids remained powerful. Christian kingdoms offered only limited assistance. The city's population remained religiously and culturally diverse. Every neighboring ruler watched carefully. Some hoped she would succeed. Others quietly expected failure. Jimena refused to surrender. She governed Valencia with remarkable determination. Supported by experienced advisors and Rodrigo's veteran household knights, she maintained order despite immense pressure. For nearly 3 years, she held the city. That achievement alone speaks volumes. Yet the military reality had changed. Without Rodrigo's leadership, Valencia became increasingly vulnerable. The Almoravids recognized the opportunity immediately. Pressure intensified. Raids multiplied. Supply lines became increasingly dangerous. The city that had once represented triumph gradually transformed into an isolated frontier fortress. Meanwhile, stories about Rodrigo began spreading almost immediately. This happened surprisingly often. Historical memory rarely waits. The moment extraordinary individuals die, people begin reshaping them into something larger than life. Small victories become great triumphs. Great triumphs become miracles. Human flaws quietly disappear. Rodrigo proved no exception. One of the earliest legends emerged almost at once. Instead, she ordered his body dressed in armor. His corpse was placed upright upon his famous horse, Babieca. The gates opened. The soldiers rode forward. Seeing El Cid apparently leading another charge, the enemy supposedly panicked and fled. It is one of medieval Europe's most famous stories. It is also almost certainly untrue. There is no reliable contemporary evidence supporting it. The tale appears only in much later traditions. Yet its popularity reveals something important. People simply could not imagine El Cid defeated. Even death seemed insufficient. The legend insisted he must win one final battle. History quietly smiled. Poetry enthusiastically agreed. The real Babieca, however, certainly existed. Rodrigo's horse had become nearly as famous as its rider. According to later accounts, Babieca had originally seemed an unimpressive young horse, overlooked by others. Rodrigo supposedly selected it anyway. Whether entirely factual or partly symbolic hardly matters. The story perfectly reflected how later generations viewed El Cid. He recognized greatness where others saw little. Together horse and rider became inseparable, much like Alexander and Bucephalus centuries earlier. Great heroes, it seems, always acquire memorable horses. Rodrigo's famous sword also entered legend. Actually, 2 swords became associated with him: Tizona and Colada. Medieval literature transformed these weapons into almost magical objects. Blades that terrified enemies. Symbols of divine favor. Modern historians remain cautious. Weapons certainly existed. The stories surrounding them grew considerably over time. Still, even stripped of myth, the swords represented something significant. Not supernatural power. Professional excellence. Rodrigo had spent decades mastering the ordinary skills that later generations preferred to describe as extraordinary. The transformation from history into legend accelerated during the following century. Minstrels carried stories from village to village. Traveling singers rarely worried excessively about strict historical accuracy. Their responsibility involved entertaining audiences. And audiences adored heroes, especially heroes who defeated impossible odds. Rodrigo's victories expanded with every retelling. His speeches became more eloquent. His enemies became more numerous. His courage became limitless. The historical commander slowly disappeared beneath layers of admiration. Around the beginning of the 13th century, an anonymous poet composed one of the greatest works of medieval Spanish literature, the Poema de mi Cid, the Song of My Cid. Unlike many later legends, This remarkable epic still preserved surprising echoes of the real Rodrigo. Its hero was courageous, intelligent, resourceful, deeply concerned with honor, yet also practical. The poem begins not with triumph, but with exile. A man forced to leave his homeland, separated from his family, determined to rebuild his fortune. The emotional heart of the story remained recognizably human. Perhaps that explains its enduring power. Readers recognize themselves within it. Who has never experienced disappointment? Who has never hoped for redemption? Who has never dreamed of proving doubters wrong? The poem offered all of these, wrapped inside magnificent storytelling. Back in Valencia, reality proved less forgiving than poetry. By 1102, Jimena could no longer defend the city alone. King Alfonso VI arrived with an army, not to reinforce Valencia permanently, to evacuate it. The decision must have been heartbreaking. The city Rodrigo had fought so hard to win could not be held indefinitely. Rather than allowing the Almoravids to capture it intact, Alfonso ordered much of Valencia abandoned. Important buildings were burned, supplies removed. The Christian population withdrew northward. Jimena left alongside them. Some traditions claim Rodrigo's body traveled with the departing procession. If so, the conqueror departed the city he loved one final time. Silent. Motionless. Far from the triumphant entrance 8 years earlier, the Almoravids entered the ruins soon afterward. Valencia had changed hands again. History moved forward, as it always does. Yet something remarkable had happened. Rodrigo had lost his city, but somehow, he had begun winning eternity. The man was gone. The memory remained. And with each passing generation, that memory would grow stronger. Soon kings themselves would invoke his name. Artists would paint him. Poets would celebrate him. Entire nations would claim him as their greatest medieval hero. The real Rodrigo Diaz had finally laid down his sword. El Cid Campeador, however, was only beginning his longest campaign. One fought not across battlefields, but across the centuries. From history to immortality, there is a curious thing about memory. It is rarely satisfied with ordinary people. Give it enough time, and memory begins sanding away rough edges, polishing imperfections, and quietly replacing complicated truths with stories that feel somehow more satisfying. Heroes become nobler. Villains become darker. Victories become grander. Defeats slowly disappear. History records events. Memory tells stories. Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar was fortunate, or perhaps unfortunate enough, to become both. After his death, the world he had known continued changing with astonishing speed. The Almoravid Empire, which had seemed so unstoppable during Rodrigo's final years, eventually began showing the same weaknesses that had undone so many kingdoms before it. Success created wealth. Wealth created comfort. Comfort sometimes weakened discipline. Local governors pursued their own ambitions. Rivalries emerged. Power shifted. History, as always, refused to stand still. New dynasties would cross from North Africa. The Almohads would replace the Almoravids. New Christian kingdoms would continue expanding southward. Castile would grow stronger. Aragon would reach across the Mediterranean. Portugal would establish itself permanently as an independent kingdom. Generations passed. Children who had never heard Rodrigo's voice grew into old age. Then their grandchildren grew old as well. Eventually, no living person remained who had actually known the man. Only stories survived. Stories possess remarkable freedom. Unlike eyewitnesses, they never feel obligated to explain uncertainty. They confidently describe conversations no one recorded. They remember speeches no one wrote down. They explain private thoughts no one could possibly know. Audiences generally enjoy certainty. Reality rarely provides it. The Poma de Mio Cid became the foundation upon which Rodrigo's legend continued growing. Composed around the beginning of the 13th century, probably only a century after his death, it remains one of the earliest masterpieces of Spanish literature. Unlike many medieval epics, it feels surprisingly grounded. Its hero laughs. He worries. He suffers humiliation. He misses his family. He celebrates small victories. The Rodrigo of the poem is extraordinary, certainly, but he remains recognizably human. That humanity may explain why readers continued loving him for centuries. The poem presents exile as its emotional center, not conquest, not even victory. Exile. Everything begins with loss. Rodrigo rides away from Castile, leaving behind his wife Jimena and his daughters, uncertain whether he will ever see them again. He is not yet the mighty lord of Valencia. He is simply a man trying to rebuild his life. There is something timeless about that. Almost everyone, at some point, has experienced beginning again. In the poem, each success feels earned. Every victory restores a little more honor. Every challenge overcome brings Rodrigo one step closer to reconciliation. It is not merely a military story. It is a story about dignity, about perseverance, about refusing to surrender after failure. Perhaps that explains why it survived while countless other medieval tales disappeared. People recognized themselves within it. Even those who had never carried a sword understood disappointment. As the centuries passed, the legend continued evolving. The Catholic monarchs, Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon, who completed the conquest of Granada in 1492, inherited a Spain very different from Rodrigo's fragmented peninsula. The Reconquista, at least in its traditional historical interpretation, had reached its symbolic conclusion. It was natural for rulers seeking to unite Spain to look backward toward earlier heroes. El Cid offered exactly what they needed: a brave Christian warrior, a loyal defender, a symbol of perseverance. Reality, of course, had been considerably more complicated. The historical Rodrigo had served Muslim rulers. He had fought Christians. He had negotiated with anyone whose interests aligned with his own. Yet myths often simplify where history complicates. Gradually, the complicated frontier commander became something closer to a national icon. During the Renaissance, scholars rediscovered classical literature and began comparing medieval heroes with figures from ancient Greece and Rome. Rodrigo found himself mentioned alongside Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and Hector. Painters imagined scenes they had never witnessed. Sculptors carved idealized faces they had never seen. Each generation quietly recreated El Cid according to its own values. The Enlightenment brought another change. Historians began asking uncomfortable questions. Did every famous story really happen? Was the oath of Santa Gadea genuine? Did Rodrigo truly ride into battle after death? Were some victories exaggerated? Critical scholarship slowly emerged. Documents received closer examination. Chronicles were compared. Dates were checked. Legends were weighed against surviving evidence. Some romantic tales quietly collapsed. Remarkably, Rodrigo's reputation survived the scrutiny. Because even without the miracles, the real story remained extraordinary. A lesser nobleman from Vivar had risen through talent rather than inheritance. He had survived exile, built an independent principality, governed one of Iberia's richest cities, defeated armies that vastly outnumbered his own. Few embellishments were actually necessary. Then came the 19th century. Europe fell deeply in love with medieval history. Castles became fashionable. Knights returned to novels. Painters filled enormous canvases with dramatic battles beneath stormy skies. National identity became increasingly important. Every country searched its past for heroic figures capable of representing courage, honor, and sacrifice. Spain naturally looked toward El Cid. Novelists embraced him. Poets celebrated him. Composers wrote operas inspired by his life. Schoolchildren learned his story. The line between historical Rodrigo and legendary El Cid blurred even further. By the 20th century, cinema discovered him. Perhaps the most famous portrayal arrived in 1961 with the epic film El Cid, starring Charlton Heston as Rodrigo and Sophia Loren as Jimena. The sweeping landscapes, enormous battle scenes, and stirring music introduced millions of viewers to the legend. Like nearly every historical film, it sacrificed some accuracy for drama, but it also captured something genuine. The sense that Rodrigo belonged not merely to one century, but to the imagination itself. Meanwhile, historians continued uncovering documents. Arabic chroniclers offered valuable perspectives often absent from Christian sources. Latin charters revealed administrative details. Archaeology illuminated everyday life in Valencia. A more balanced picture gradually emerged. Modern scholarship presents Rodrigo neither as flawless saint nor ruthless opportunist. Instead, he appears as something far more interesting. A remarkably capable military commander navigating one of medieval Europe's most complex political landscapes. He was deeply religious, yet practical, loyal, yet adaptable, ambitious, yet generally restrained. A man shaped by circumstances as much as by personal character. Perhaps that complexity explains why historians remain fascinated. Simple heroes become predictable. Complicated people remain endlessly worth studying. Consider once more the remarkable contradictions. A Christian knight honored with an Arabic title. A servant of kings who built his own principality. A warrior remembered equally in Christian and Muslim chronicles. A conqueror who governed through cooperation as often as force. He belonged completely to neither world. And somehow, to both. Walking today through the streets of modern Burgos, Vivar, or Valencia, visitors still encounter reminders of Rodrigo Diaz. Statues stand proudly in public squares. Street names preserve his memory. Museums display artifacts connected with his era. The landscape itself remains surprisingly recognizable. The same broad Castilian skies. The same dry plains. The same Mediterranean light bathing Valencia's old walls each evening. Nearly 1,000 years have passed. Empires have risen and fallen. Languages have evolved. Borders have shifted countless times. Yet the places that shaped Rodrigo continue quietly existing. There is something comforting about that. Stone outlasts politics. Rivers ignore dynasties. The wind crossing the plains of Castile today is, in many ways, the same wind that once carried the banners of El Cid. History sometimes feels astonishingly close. And yet, despite all the scholarship, despite every surviving document, despite centuries of research, there remains one question no historian can answer completely. Who was Rodrigo Diaz when no one was watching? Not the commander before battle. Not the lord receiving ambassadors. Not the legendary hero celebrated by poets. Simply the man. Perhaps he smiled more often than chroniclers mention. Perhaps he worried constantly. Perhaps he doubted himself before every campaign. Perhaps he missed home even after creating a new one. Those quiet human moments vanish more easily than battles. History preserves extraordinary deeds. Ordinary emotions often disappear. Maybe that is why stories continue filling the gaps. Because legends, for all their exaggerations, attempt to restore something documents cannot record. The feeling of a life. The journey is nearing its end. Only one final chapter remains. Not about conquest. Not about battles. But about what else Cid still whispers to us across nearly a millennium of history, as the world grows quiet and the night slowly deepens. The last watch beneath the Castilian sky. And now, the swords have finally fallen silent. The banners no longer snap in the wind. The horses have found their stables. The watchfires along the frontier have burned down to glowing embers. The roads that once carried armies now carry only travelers, shepherds, and the slow creak of wooden carts beneath endless Spanish skies. If you were to walk across Castile tonight, long after the sun has disappeared behind the western hills, you might notice how quiet the land has become. The stars seem impossibly bright here. The air grows cool after the day's relentless heat. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls from the ruins of an old watchtower. A shepherd gathers his flock beneath the moonlight. The wind slips gently through dry grass, carrying with it the scent of wild thyme and dust. It is almost impossible to imagine that this peaceful landscape was once among the most dangerous frontiers in Europe. Yet every hill remembers. Every ruined castle remembers. Every forgotten road once echoed beneath the hooves of knights riding toward uncertain futures. Among them rode Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, not knowing that nearly 1,000 years later, strangers from distant lands would still speak his name. History has an unusual way of choosing its heroes. Some kings ruled kingdoms 10 times larger than Valencia. Most are now little more than names buried inside old manuscripts. Some emperors commanded armies numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Their monuments have crumbled. Their palaces have disappeared. Their victories have faded into footnotes. Rodrigo possessed none of those advantages. He never wore a royal crown. He never founded a lasting dynasty. His kingdom survived him only a few years. Measured by territory alone, his achievements seem surprisingly modest. Measured by memory, they become enormous. Why? Perhaps because people recognize something deeply human in his story. He was not born into overwhelming privilege. He inherited neither empire nor immense fortune. Almost everything he achieved came after losing nearly everything. Exile could have destroyed him. For many men, it certainly would have. Imagine that moment again. The gates of Castile closing behind him. His king's command still echoing in his mind. His wife and children left behind for their own safety. A handful of loyal companions riding beside him into uncertainty. No guarantees. No clear destination. No promise that anyone would ever welcome him again. Only the road. Sometimes history changes because someone refuses to stop walking. Rodrigo kept writing. He adapted when circumstances demanded adaptation. He fought when battle became unavoidable. He negotiated when negotiation offered better results. He waited patiently when patience promised greater rewards than reckless courage. Perhaps that was his greatest gift. He understood that strength is not merely force. Strength is endurance. The medieval world often celebrated reckless bravery. Charging directly toward danger certainly produced memorable songs. It also produced remarkably short careers. Rodrigo survived because he balanced courage with calculation. He rarely confused boldness with foolishness. That distinction allowed him to accomplish what many stronger men never could. He built rather than merely destroyed. It is worth remembering that Valencia became the high point of his life not because he conquered it, but because he governed it. Conquest lasts days. Government lasts years. The marketplaces reopened because of administration. The irrigation canals flowed because someone organized repairs. Merchants returned because roads became safe. Families rebuilt homes because stability replaced chaos. None of these achievements sound particularly dramatic. Yet civilizations are built from such ordinary victories. Perhaps history spends too much time celebrating battles and not enough celebrating the peaceful mornings that follow them. Rodrigo himself probably would have appreciated that thought. He had seen enough battlefields to understand their true cost. The songs speak proudly of glorious charges. They say rather less about widows, or orphaned children, or abandoned farms slowly returning to wilderness. Real victory is measured by what survives after the fighting ends. In that respect, Valencia became his masterpiece. Of course, even masterpieces fade. The city returned to Almoravid control after his death. The frontier shifted again. Generations fought new wars for new reasons. Eventually, the world Rodrigo knew disappeared entirely. Gunpowder replaced castles. Ocean voyages replaced frontier campaigns. Printing presses replaced wandering minstrels. Empires crossed oceans that medieval Europeans barely imagined. Time carried humanity into entirely different ages. And yet, El Cid remained. Not because every story proved true. Many certainly did not. Not because every legend survived careful scholarship. Some collapsed beneath historical evidence. He remained because the essential journey continued resonating. A man loses everything, refuses despair, builds something greater than before, protects those who depend upon him, leaves behind an example rather than merely possessions. That story belongs to every century. Modern historians often encourage us to separate the legend from the man. It is wise advice. The historical Rodrigo deserves to be understood on his own terms. He was neither flawless hero nor ruthless villain. He occupied the complicated middle ground where real human beings usually live. He served Muslim rulers. He fought Christian armies. He made political compromises. He pursued wealth alongside honor. He displayed generosity. He could also display harshness when circumstances demanded. In other words, he was real. And perhaps reality is more impressive than perfection, because perfection teaches us very little. Real people teach resilience. Real people make mistakes. Real people adapt. Rodrigo adapted repeatedly. That adaptability transformed an exiled knight into one of Europe's greatest military leaders. There is another lesson quietly hidden within his story. Borders change. Alliances change. Enemies become allies. Allies become rivals. The frontier world of medieval Spain refused simple categories. Christians, Muslims, and Jews lived beside one another. They traded together, worked together, argued together, occasionally fought together. History rarely fits neatly inside modern assumptions. It is usually more tangled, more human, more surprising. Perhaps that complexity is worth remembering, especially now. As the night grows deeper around us, imagine Valencia one final time, not during siege, not during triumph, simply at peace. The moon reflects across the Mediterranean. Fishing boats rock gently inside the harbor. Orange trees sway beneath a warm evening breeze. The streets have grown quiet. Only the footsteps of the night watch echo softly through ancient stone alleys. High above the rooftops, stars fill the Spanish sky exactly as they did nearly 1,000 years ago. Somewhere along those walls, perhaps only in imagination now, stands a solitary figure. An aging commander looking toward the dark southern horizon. Watching. Waiting. Not for glory. Not for songs. Simply because protecting others had become the purpose of his life. That image, whether perfectly historical or gently poetic, somehow feels appropriate. Because El Cid has always stood upon a frontier, not merely between Christian and Muslim Spain, but between history and legend, between the man and the myth, between memory and truth. And perhaps, there is no need to choose only one. The historical Rodrigo gives us facts. The legendary El Cid gives us meaning. Together, they remind us that courage is rarely loud. Leadership is rarely easy. Honor is rarely simple. And the greatest victories are often the ones that allow ordinary people to live ordinary lives in peace. The wind continues moving across Castile tonight. It passes over Vivar, where Rodrigo first opened his eyes to the world. It crosses Burgos, where exile once began. It sweeps through the mountain passes he crossed with weary companions. It reaches Valencia, where he built his greatest achievement beside the glittering Mediterranean Sea. The same wind. The same stars. The same quiet earth. Long after kingdoms have vanished. Long after banners have turned to dust. Long after swords have rusted away. Perhaps that is the final gift history offers us. The reminder that no life, however extraordinary, lasts forever. But kindness can. Courage can. Perseverance can. And stories. Stories have a remarkable habit of outliving us all. So, as our journey finally comes to its end, let the walls of Valencia fade gently into the darkness. Let the horses return to their stables. Let the watchfires burn low beneath the endless Spanish sky. And let Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, El Cid Campeador, the exile who became a prince, the warrior who became a legend, ride quietly into history once more. Not with the thunder of charging cavalry, not with the clash of steel, but with the soft rhythm of distant hoofbeats disappearing into the warm Mediterranean night, until only the wind remains. And sleep, at last, gently follows.